The wind on the high plains showed no mercy. It was a razor, honed on the peaks of the bighorns, and it swept down across the Cheyenne Trail, carrying nothing but grit and the promise of a hard winter. It scoured the land, leaving the red earth cracked and thirsty. From the quiet of a rocky outcrop, Nisoi watched. He was a man made of the same stillness as the granite he leaned against. His eyes, accustomed to the vast distances, missed nothing. He was Northern Cheyenne, a warrior who had served as a scout, and who now served only as a guardian. He guarded the thin ribbon of water they called the Red Elk, and he guarded the herds of horses hidden in the draws, the last true wealth of his people. The drought was coming. He could smell it in the air, taste it in the dust. The creek was already low, a shadow of its usual spring flow. His people were worried. The railroad, that iron snake pushing west, consumed water, consumed land, and consumed men. A small cloud of dust appeared in the east. It was not the rolling thunder of the buffalo. Those were almost gone. It was the steady, mechanical churn of the stagecoach, a dull red beetle crawling across the hide of the prairie. Nisoi watched it fight the wind. He felt no anger, only a deep, cold vigilance. Every coach brought new hunger, new fences, and new threats to the water. His duty was to watch. Inside that coach, Eliza Mallory felt every jolt in her bones. She braced herself against the rough planking of the seat, her body aching from days of relentless travel. She was a slender woman, but the angle of her jaw and the steady endurance in her eyes spoke of a strength that was not physical. She tasted the grit between her teeth and felt it line her eyelashes. The man beside her, a salesman smelling of stale whiskey and sweat, had given up trying to speak to her 100 miles ago. Liza was grateful for the silence. It allowed her to focus on the small, terrified ember of hope she nursed in her chest. She was starting over. She was traveling to a place where no one knew her name, where no one knew her story, a place where she could be safe. She shifted, an involuntary wince pulling at her lips. The high, starched collar of her dress, buttoned tight to her chin, chafed the delicate skin of her throat. Beneath the collar, beneath the layers of her bodice, the scars pulled tight. They were her constant companions, a raised, slick map of the fire that had changed her life a year prior. The skin on her neck and across the high curve of her left breast was a geography of ruin. She hid it, as she hid everything. Her right hand never left the reticule on her lap. Inside, wrapped in twine, was the small bundle of letters. They were her talisman, her proof that this entire journey was not a fever dream. The letters were from him, Cole McKenna. They were simple, direct, and spoke of a life of hard work. The handwriting was careful, the words formed with a deliberate strength. He needed a partner. He had written, not for show, but for help, to build a life. She had read those letters maybe 500 times. She knew the loop of his C and the firm cross of his T. They were the words of an honest man, a man who offered not romance, but a foundation. For Liza Mallory, who had lost every foundation she had ever known, it was more than enough. It was everything. The stage driver's shout cut through her thoughts. The coach groaned, swayed, and finally lurched to a halt. They had arrived. Red Bluff, Wyoming territory. It was not so much a town as a raw wound on the prairie. A single wide street, ankle-deep in dust, was flanked by wooden sidewalks of uneven height. The metallic clang of a blacksmith's hammer cut through the incessant wind. The railroad was coming. The freshly sawn lumber of the expanding depot and the endless stacks of iron rails dominated the south end of town. Liza stepped down onto the shaky boardwalk, her legs trembling. The wind immediately tried to steal her bonnet. The noise was a shock after the emptiness of the plains. Voices roared from the Red Bluff Saloon and Hotel, a 2-story structure that listed slightly to the left. Across the street, the bell of the newly built church rang, calling the faithful to a midweek service. A thin, pious sound against the howl of the wind. A sign was nailed to the saloon's entryway. The paint still fresh. It read, $20 for any Cheyenne scalp, $50 for a warrior brought in, dead or alive. Liza's breath caught. Her hand instinctively flew to her collar, her fingers pressing against the stiff fabric, shielding the scars beneath. This was the civilization she had paid her last dollar to reach. This was her safe harbor. A man watched her from the steps of the marshal's office. He was tall, dressed in a clean suit, and wore his badge with a kind of lazy ownership. Marshal DeWitt. He tipped his hat, but his eyes were not kind. They were the eyes of a man who calculates, who weighs every new arrival on a scale of profit and loss. He saw a lone woman, and his gaze lingered. Across the street, next to the busy post and telegraph office, was a newer sign, Silas Kincaid, Land and Rail Services. It looked efficient and menacing. Liza held her reticule tighter. The letters were from here. The postmark was Red Bluff. She took a deep, dusty breath and held her head high. She was not the girl who had been burned. She was the woman who had survived. Miles away, in the windswept hills west of the town, Cole McKenna swung his axe. The impact shuddered up his arms. The pine logs split clean. He was a broad man, built of the same hard materials as the land he worked. He moved with a rough economy of motion, his body honed by war and the long, solitary fight against drought. He tossed the split wood onto the pile. His ranch was failing. The creek that fed his pastures was slowing to a trickle. The war had taken his youth, and the fever that followed had taken his sister, Maggie. He was alone, and the solitude was grinding him down. He needed a partner, not for comfort, but for survival. He needed someone to manage the house. The chickens, the small details that slipped through his fingers while he fought to keep his horses alive. He was building a new breaking pen, dreaming of a contract to supply the railroad. But he could not be in two places at once. He was a horseman, not a bookkeeper. He was not a man for words. He knew his own rough nature. This mail-order bride arrangement was a desperate bargain, a practical solution to a practical problem. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. The stage was due. He hated going to town. He hated the saloon's noise, the church's judgment, and the silky voice of Silas Kincaid, the railroad agent who was squeezing the life out of the valley. But he had made a contract. He strapped his gun belt on, pulled his hat low, and swung onto his horse. He was not riding in to meet a bride. He was riding in to collect a shipment. In his office, Silas Kincaid looked at a map. Not the land. The map was clean. The land was messy. Kincaid preferred clean. He was an agent for the railroad, which meant he was an agent of progress. He wore a fine suit, and his hands were soft. He did not fight the land. He bought it, or he starved it. He smiled, tracing a blue line on the map with one manicured finger. The Red Elk, a small, temporary diversion dam, high in the hills, was already underway. It would redirect the bulk of the spring melt toward the large, empty acreage the railroad had claimed. The smaller ranches downstream, like Cole McKenna's, would be dust by midsummer. The postmaster, a nervous man named Fields, hovered by the door. "She's here, Mr. Kincaid, the woman for McKenna. She's arrived on the coach." "Excellent," Kincaid said, not looking up. A new bride. How wonderful. A man with new responsibilities is a man with new fears. He will be much more eager to sell when the dust starts to settle. Kincaid paid for information. He paid for hired guns to patrol his new fences, and he paid Marshal DeWitt to look the other way. The entire town was a machine, and he was the one winding the spring. High on the ridge, Nisoe watched the rancher ride into town. He watched the woman, small and alone, standing by her trunk. He saw her look at the sign on the saloon and saw her flinch, her hand flying to her throat. Liza saw him dismount. Cole McKenna. He was bigger than she had imagined, and harder. His face was granite, carved by the wind and shadow. He did not smile. He did not look at her with tenderness. He looked at her like she was a horse he was considering buying. She took a step forward, forcing her legs to move. She clutched the letters, the fragile paper that held the promise of a home. The wind tore at her bonnet, whipping her hair across her face, stinging her eyes with the red dust of the Cheyenne Trail. The coach was perhaps 10 miles from Red Bluff when the world exploded. They were navigating the narrow slit of Rattlesnake Gulch, the high rock walls echoing the clatter of the wheels. When the first shot cracked the dry air, the driver, a man named Henderson, screamed. It was a high, thin sound, cut short. The heavy coach lurched violently, tilting onto 2 wheels as the horses panicked, their whinnies sharp with terror. The salesman beside Liza was thrown from his seat, his head striking the roof with a sickening thud. "Ambush!" the shotgun guard yelled from atop. Another shot answered him, and the heavy impact of a body falling onto the roof told Liza he was gone. The coach slammed back down, Wood screaming, and skidded sideways against the canyon wall, throwing Liza to the floor. She landed hard, the air driven from her lungs. The salesman moaned, a wet, rattling sound. Get out now!" a rough voice bellowed from outside. Liza scrambled behind her small, battered trunk, her heart a cold hammer against her ribs. The salesman was bleeding from his forehead, dazed and unmoving. She fumbled in a reticule, her fingers closing not on the letters, but on the small, bone-handled folding knife her father had given her years ago. It was barely a tool, not a weapon. Her hand shook so badly she could hardly grip it. The smell of gunpowder and hot metal filled the air. The door was ripped open. A man in a filthy duster, his face obscured by a red bandana, loomed in the opening. His eyes were cold and empty. "The woman," he snarled, his gaze fixing on her. He reached in, his hand grasping for her arm. From the ridge high above, Nisoe had watched the trap being set. He had seen the 2 riders hiding. Not Cheyenne, but white men, moving with the sloppiness of hired guns. They were clumsy, dismounted in a place that offered poor cover. As the man reached for Liza, Nisoe put 2 fingers to his lips and gave a sharp, piercing whistle. It was not a human sound. It was the cry of a red-tailed hawk diving for a kill. The man in the duster flinched, his head snapping up to scan the ridge. "Who is that?" Niso's horse, a paint bred for silence and speed, moved like water flowing over the rock. Niso did not ride the horse in the way of the white men. He was part of it. He was on the far side of the animal, shielded, showing only a leg and an eye. He whistled again, a different note, a signal of confusion. The second gunman, who had been covering the coach from a stand of juniper, turned, searching for this new threat. Nisoe raised his rifle. He did not aim to kill. Killing brought soldiers. He aimed at the rock face just above the first man's head. He fired. The bullet struck the granite, exploding into 1,000 stinging pieces of stone shrapnel. The man screamed, a high, thin sound, and fell back from the coach door, his hands flying to his face. "I am hit!" he shrieked. "Where did that come from?" his partner yelled, firing blindly toward the ridge. The bullet whined harmlessly overhead. Nisoe was already gone, moving 50 yards down the ridgeline, invisible. He fired again, this time kicking up dust near the feet of the second man's horse. The animal, already spooked, reared in terror and bolted down the gulch, its rider cursing as he fought for control, pulling the reins hard. The first man, his face a mask of blood from the stone chips, scrambled to his feet. He staggered toward his own horse, terror having replaced his aggression. For a brief, sharp second, Nisoe's eyes met Liza's. She was staring up at the ridge from the dark interior of the coach, her face pale, the small knife clutched in her white knuckles. He saw her terror, but in that terror, he saw something else. She was not screaming. She was not crying. She was preparing to use the knife. He acknowledged her with a slow, deliberate blink. The moment passed. He and his horse vanished back into the landscape, becoming stone and shadow once more. The ambushers had not accounted for Cole McKenna. He was riding in from the west, checking the fences along his worthless, dry pastures, and had heard the shots echo from the gulch. He came not from the trail, but over the low swell of the prairie, pushing his horse hard. He saw the last man, the one whose horse had bolted circling back, trying to regain control. He saw the coach stalled against the canyon wall. Cole did not shout. He drew his revolver and rode straight at the man. The hired gun turned, his eyes wide with surprise, and tried to raise his rifle, but Cole was already on him. Cole did not fire. He crashed his horse into the other, a brutal collision of horseflesh and leather. As the man tumbled from the saddle, Cole was off his own mount. He landed on the man, his weight driving the breath from the ambusher's lungs. Cole's forearm slammed across the man's throat. "Who paid you?" Cole's voice was a low growl, vibrating with rage. The man choked, his eyes wide with panic. "I do not—" "Who—" The man gurgled, clawing at Cole's arm, but footsteps scrambled on the rocks above. The first ambusher, the one hit by Niso's shrapnel, was firing down at them, his shots wild. Cole rolled, dragging the man he held as a shield. A bullet snapped where he had been. The man under him went limp. Cole realized the man was not fighting. He was dead. The shot from the ridge had caught him high in the back. Cole cursed, shoving the body away. He fired twice toward the rocks, forcing the remaining gunman to take cover. He used the moment to sprint for the coach. He ripped the damaged door open. Liza was huddled inside, her knuckles white on the knife. The salesman was unconscious on the floor. Cole's presence filled the small space. He smelled of horse, leather, and sweat. "He is gone," Cole said. His voice was rough as gravel, yet quiet. "The other one, he ran." He offered her his hand. It was calloused and huge. "You are safe." Liza looked at the hand, then at his face. She uncurled her fingers from the knife and placed her trembling hand in his. He pulled her down from the coach. She stumbled on the uneven ground, her legs weak, and he steadied her, his grip firm on her arm. She was smaller than he had thought, and she was shaking like an aspen leaf. The driver was dead, slumped over the seat. The guard was dead on the roof. Cole checked the salesman. Breathing, he will have a hard head for a week. Liza's dress was torn at the shoulder, ripped by the splintered wood of the coach frame. She was shaking, the reaction setting in, and she fumbled to pull the fabric together, her fingers clumsy. Nisoe emerged from the rocks, silent as a shadow. He walked to the man Cole had tackled, the one shot in the back. Cole's hand instinctively went to his gun, but Nisoe ignored him. The warrior knelt by the dead man. With practiced fingers, he felt inside the man's vest. He pulled something free, a small tin badge pinned to the inside lining. It was not a lawman's badge. It was stamped with a simple K and company. Nisoe looked at it, his face impassive. He knew the mark. Kincaid. This was not a robbery. It was a message. He slipped the badge into his own pouch just as Cole turned. "What did you find?" Cole asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. Nisoe stood. "Nothing," he said. He looked at Cole. "The other man is gone. You are lucky. Someone was watching." Cole's jaw tightened. He did not trust the Cheyenne. He had fought them, but he also knew, with a sinking certainty, that the shots from the ridge had saved the coach. Liza, desperate to cover herself, tried to pin the torn fabric of her dress. Her fingers were numb and useless. The high collar of her dress, already chafed, gaped open. As she moved, the motion pulled the collar wide, revealing the raised, scarred skin beneath. It ran from the hollow of her throat down toward her breast, a slick, pale geography of old pain. She gasped and tried to pull it closed, her face flushing with a shame that was suddenly more painful than the fear she had just felt. Cole had turned back to her, and his eyes stopped. He did not look away. He did not flinch or recoil. His gaze rested on the scar for a long second, taking in the texture, the stark, ruined landscape of her skin. Liza froze, waiting for the pity, the disgust. It was the look she dreaded most. Cole said nothing. He simply took off his own heavy canvas coat, the one smelling of dust and pine, and draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy and blessedly warm. "The wind is cold," he said, his voice flat. He turned away to cut the lead horses free from the harness. By the time Cole led the limping coach into Red Bluff, with the dead and the wounded, the town was already buzzing. Marshal DeWitt was the first to meet them, his face a mask of official concern. "Cheyenne," DeWitt announced, looking at the dead driver. "Had to be raiding the trail again. This is getting out of hand." "It was not Cheyenne," Cole said, his voice low. He was tired. "How do you know?" DeWitt snapped. "You see them." "I saw 2 men," Cole said. "White men. They shot from ambush. In the gulch, they were probably running from the same war party that hit the coach," DeWitt said, dismissing him. He was already shaping the story. From the boardwalk, Silas Kincaid stepped forward, his suit immaculate, his face a picture of distress. "This is a terrible tragedy, Marshal, truly terrible. Red Bluff needs protection. My company has resources. I would be willing to hire a contingent of private guards for the town, for a reasonable fee. Of course, we cannot let these savages disrupt progress." The crowd murmured in agreement. Fear was a powerful motivator. Liza stood by the coach, wrapped in Cole's oversized coat. She watched Kincaid. She watched DeWitt. She saw how their eyes met, a quick, knowing glance. Nisoi had vanished long before they reached the town limits, but the story was already set. Cheyenne attack. Cole took Liza to the small room above the saloon, the only lodging in town. He left her at the door. He was silent, his face grim and unreadable. Liza watched him walk away. He had seen her. He had seen the one thing she had crossed a continent to hide. His silence, she thought, was pity. He had offered her his coat to cover her, to hide the ugliness. He was trapped now, bound by a contract to a damaged woman. She sank onto the cot, the coat still clutched around her, and felt a cold despair settle in her stomach. Cole walked down the stairs, his gut churning. He had seen the ambush. He had seen her face when the man reached for her. And he had seen the scar. He was a fool. What right did he have, bringing a woman like that? A woman who looked like she was made of glass to this God's forsaken place. She was terrified. She would be useless on the ranch. She was probably already regretting the bargain, wishing she was back east. The scar did not matter. The terror in her eyes did. He had made a mistake. He found her an hour later, after he had buried the driver. She was sitting in the corner of the saloon's dining room, nursing a cup of tea. She looked small in his coat. "We can go to the preacher in the morning," Cole said gruffly, standing over her. "Get it done!" Liza looked up at him, her eyes shadowed. "Mr. McKenna," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "You do not have to honor this. After what you saw, what happened?" Cole frowned. "What I saw you hold a knife on a man with a gun. You did not scream." "I mean," she faltered, her hand rising to the collar of his coat. The scar." "The scar is your business," he said, impatient. "The contract is mine. We had an agreement." "The agreement was based on your letters," she said, her voice finding strength. "Your kindness. I have kept them all." She reached into her reticule and pulled out the small, worn bundle, wrapped in twine. "I cannot hold you to promises made in pity." Cole stared at the bundle. He looked confused. "My letters?" "They meant everything to me," Liza said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "How you spoke of your sister, Maggie. How you needed a partner to build with. Your words were—" "I do not know what you are talking about," Cole said. Liza stopped. "What?" "I never wrote you any letters," Cole said, his voice flat. The blood drained from Liza's face. She felt the room tilt. "What do you mean? This is your hand, your name, from the Red Bluff post office." Cole looked at the top letter she held out. He squinted at the script. "My sister, Maggie, she wrote some letters for me. Years ago, before she died. I was looking for a wife then, too, but that was a long time ago." "Maggie died 3 years ago," Cole said, his voice hardening. "I have not looked for a wife since." Liza's hand began to shake. No, these are recent. I received the first one 6 months ago. The last one was 2 months ago." She held it out. "It says your partner, Cole." Cole took the letter. He stared at the words, his face tightening with a mixture of anger and shame. He traced the C with his finger. "This is not Maggie's hand," he said. He looked up, his eyes cold and hard. "And I cannot read most of it." He met her gaze, the admission costing him. "I can sign my name, and I can read a brand, but I cannot read script like that. I cannot write a letter." The saloon noise faded. The air grew thin. "Then who?" Liza whispered, staring at the paper. Cole's eyes narrowed. He looked across the street, toward the land office, toward the post office. "Someone wanted you here, ma'am," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And it was not me." The silence in the saloon was thick, broken only by the tinny piano from the bar and the clink of glass. Liza stared at Cole, the bundle of forged letters feeling suddenly toxic in her hand. "Someone faked them," she whispered. The idea was absurd. It was monstrous. Why would anyone do that? Cole's face was dark. His confession of illiteracy had cost him, and the shame had hardened into anger. He looked past her, through the dirty window, at the lights of the land office and the post office. Someone who knew I was looking for a wife. Years ago. Someone who knew I could not write for myself. Someone who knew I owned land and water. Liza's mind, sharp and analytical, began to move past the shock. She spread the half-dozen letters she had received over the past 6 months onto the rough, beer-stained table. The handwriting was neat, educated, and uniform. He mentions your sister," Liza said, her voice quiet. "He said her name was Maggie. He said she passed. He used that to seem kind, sensitive." Cole's jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped. "He had no right." Liza picked up the most recent letter. I thought it smelled strange." She lifted it to her nose. It was not the musty smell of paper that had traveled far. It was sharp. "It smells of fresh ink, like the post office itself." She looked up at him, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying speed. "The ambush, Mr. McKenna. It was not a robbery. They did not take the mail sack. They did not even touch the salesman. The man at the door, he said, 'The woman.' He was looking for me." Cole's stillness was absolute. He remembered the words. "And then Mr. Kincaid," she continued, her voice gaining a cold strength. "He was there, so quickly, offering protection, blaming the Cheyenne, when you said yourself it was white men." She looked from the letters to Cole's stony face. "This is not a marriage proposal. Mr. McKenna, this is a trap. He faked these letters, using your name, to lure me here. But why?" "I do not care," Cole said, his voice flat. "You must," she insisted. "He is using you. He is using me. Why bring a lone woman to the frontier, someone with no family, no connections?" She did not need to say the next word desperate. To make me indebted to him, to rescue me from the ambush he arranged." Or, her mind supplied a darker thought. Or to use me as leverage against you, a man with a new wife is a man with a new vulnerability. I am nobody's vulnerability, Cole snarled. Then maybe I was just bait, she finished, her stomach turning. Bait to be killed in an Indian attack to justify Mr. Kincaid's private army. Bait to get you off your land. Cole stood, his chair scraping violently against the floor. He did not want to hear this. He did not want this complication. He had wanted a simple transaction, a helper. He had been given a conspiracy. Fields, he said, the name a curse. The postmaster, Liza said. Understanding. She gathered the poisoned letters, her evidence, and followed him, still wrapped in his heavy coat. They crossed the dark, windy street. The light in the post office was still burning. Cole pushed the door open without knocking. Fields, the nervous postmaster, was at his desk, totaling figures in a ledger. He jumped, his pen scratching across the page. Mr. McKenna, I am closed. Cole slapped the bundle of letters on the counter. The twine snapped. They have my name on them. They came from this office. I did not write them. Fields' face went pale. He licked his lips, his eyes darting to the door, to the window that faced Kincaid's office. I do not understand. I just process the mail. It is not my business what folks write. Who posted them? Liza asked. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the small room. Someone local, someone who bought this exact paper. She pointed to the stack of stationery on a shelf behind Fields. Someone who used your ink. I sell that to lots of folks. Fields stammered, wringing his hands. I cannot be expected to remember every transaction. Cole leaned forward. He did not raise his voice. He was a large man, and his quiet menace filled the room. You will remember, or you will find out what happens when you lie to me. I am not lying, Fields squeaked, sweat beading on his forehead. I do not know. People come and go. Who else has access to this room? Liza pressed. Who else could be here after hours, writing and stamping letters? No one, Fields said, too quickly. Just the clerk, Mr. Kincaid's clerk. He comes by to pick up the railroad dispatches. He has a key for the late box, that is all. Cole and Liza looked at each other. Kincaid's clerk. I have said all I know, Fields pleaded, his voice trembling. Please, I have work to do. Cole held the man's gaze for a long, painful second, then turned and left. Liza followed him onto the dark boardwalk. He knows, Liza said quietly. He is terrified of Kincaid. Cole stared at the dark street. He will be dealt with. A long silence stretched between them, filled by the howling wind. I do not know what to do, Liza said, the adrenaline of the confrontation fading, leaving her cold and empty. I have no money. I have nowhere to go. Cole turned to her, his face a mask of frustration. His shame, his anger, his grief for his sister, it all boiled over. This is not my problem, he said, his voice rough. I did not ask you to come here. I did not write those letters. You should go back east. Take the next coach. This is not a place for... He bit off the end of the sentence. For what? Liza snapped, her own fear turning to anger. For a damaged woman. For a fool who believed a stack of paper. For anyone, Cole shot back, his voice rising. This land is hard. It is dying. I am fighting for every blade of grass. I do not need another mouth to feed. I do not need this trouble. His illiteracy, his past. She had seen it all. He had been made a fool of. I am not leaving, Liza said, her voice shaking but full of iron. I sold everything I owned to buy that ticket. There is nothing to go back to. I will not run. I am not a trouble. I am a woman who was lied to and ambushed and brought here under your name. You owe me an answer, even if you did not ask the question. I owe you nothing, he said. That is what he wants, Liza cried, gesturing to Kincaid's dark office. He wants you to send me away, to isolate you, to prove you are alone. He wants you to be scared. He wins if I run. I do not care what he wants. You should, because he is not just stealing your name. He is stealing your sister. That stopped him. The words hit him like a physical blow. Whoever wrote these letters, Liza said, her voice dropping. He used Maggie. He used your grief. He used her memory to bait his trap. Cole's face went white under his tan. The wound of Maggie's death lost in a blizzard. Looking for his stray cattle was still raw. He blamed himself. You will not speak her name, he whispered, his voice thick with pain. I will, Liza said, softer now, because I came here to honor the man in those letters. The man Maggie supposedly wrote about, even if he was a ghost. Cole looked away. Defeated, the fight went out of him. You should not be here. It is not safe. Nowhere is safe, Liza said, her hand instinctively going to the collar of his coat, to the scars beneath. I learned that a year ago, in a fire. But I will not be run off. If you are throwing me out, Mr. McKenna, you will have to do it now, in front of the whole town. Otherwise, I am staying. I will work for my keep, until we find out who did this. He stared at her. The woman was not made of glass. She was made of whipcord and steel. A shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness between the blacksmith shop and the feed store. Nizoe stepped into the lantern light. Cole's hand dropped to his revolver. Niso ignored him, and he ignored Liza. His focus was on the hills, on the land. The red elk is low, he said. His voice was quiet, like dry leaves skittering on rock. It is the drought, Cole said, his hand not leaving his gun. No, Nisoe said. It is a dam, 2 miles upstream from the fork, new wood, cut with white man's saws. Cole froze. This was not about letters. This was about water. This was about survival. You saw this? I saw the survey stakes. They are marked. Nisoe looked at Cole. K and Company, the same mark as the badge on the dead man in the gulch. He held out the small tin badge. Cole stared at it. The ambush, the letters, the water. It was one single suffocating rope. The water is being turned. Nisoe said, south, to the railroad lands. My people, our horses. We are thirsty. Your horses will be thirsty in a week. He paused. We are allies in this Kincaid. Liza watched the two men, the rough, angry rancher and the silent, watchful warrior, both of them targeted by the same unseen enemy. He is right, Mr. McKenna. Liza said, Kincaid wants your land. He used me to distract you. He is using that dam to kill your ranch. Cole looked at the badge in Nisoe's hand. He looked at Liza. He was trapped. He hated needing help. But the truth was there, cold and hard. He gave Nisoe a single sharp nod. I will see it. Tomorrow, Nisoe said, at sunrise. And he was gone, melting back into the shadows. Cole let out a long, ragged breath. He looked at Liza. He was too tired to fight anymore. I have a cabin, he said, his voice flat. It was my sister's. It is separate from the main house. You can stay there, for now, until this is settled. I will work, Liza said immediately. I can cook, I can clean, I can... We will see. He cut her off. He walked to his horse and untied the reins. Get your trunk. As they left the main street, the saloon doors swung open, spilling yellow light and raucous laughter. A drunk miner saw them. Hey, McKenna, is that the mail-order bride? The one the Cheyenne nearly got. She looks a bit skinny for a Wyoming winter. Cole ignored him, but Marshal DeWitt stepped out of his office, his thumbs hooked in his belt. Cole, he called out. A word. Cole stopped. his horse shifting impatiently. "I heard you were bothering Postmaster Fields," DeWitt said, his voice amiable. "And I saw you talking to that Indian." "We were discussing the ambush," Cole said. "That is my business," DeWitt said, his smile fading. "And my advice to you is to leave it alone. The Cheyenne are restless. It is best not to antagonize them. And it is best not to be seen associating with them. It makes the townsfolk nervous. Keep your head down. Cole, things will be much more stable if you do. My water is being stolen." "Marshal," Cole said, his voice low. "That is a civil matter," DeWitt replied, turning to go back inside. "Not my concern. You have a good night." Cole said nothing. He helped Liza mount his horse, then swung up behind her. Her trunk balanced in front of him. They rode out of Red Bluff, leaving the false lights and whispered warnings behind. The ranch was dark and silent. The cabin he led her to was small. Just one room, but it was sturdy. It smelled of dust, dried herbs, and faintly of roses. "It is not much," he said, lighting the lantern on the table. "But the roof is sound." "It is perfect," Liza said, her voice quiet. "Thank you." He turned to leave, then hesitated at the door. The shame of his secret, his illiteracy, was still eating at him. The fact that she had been trapped by it. "My sister," he said, not looking at her. "Maggie, she really did write letters. A long time ago. When I first thought, well..." He walked to a small, carved wooden box on a shelf. He unlocked it with a key from his pocket. "I kept them," he said. "I do not know why. They never got sent, or no one ever answered." He pulled out a small bundle of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. The paper was yellowed with age. "These are the real ones," he said. He handed the bundle to her. It was a peace offering, an apology, an admission. "The one she wrote for me." He left, closing the door softly behind him, leaving her alone in the lantern light. Liza sat on the edge of the narrow cot. She looked at the forged letters in her lap, then at the real ones in her hand. She slowly untied the ribbon. She unfolded the first letter. The handwriting was completely different. It was round, full of life, and slanted upward. "To the good woman who reads this, it began, 'My brother, Cole, does not know I am writing. He is a good man, though he is quiet and does not show his heart. He has been lonely since the war. He loves his horses, and he loves this land. He needs a partner, someone with a kind hand, to..." Liza read the words of the long-dead Maggie. She read about Cole, the real Cole, the man who was grieving, the man who could tame a wild horse but could not read a book, the man she thought she was coming to marry. She compared this letter to the cold, practical, efficient forgeries. The fakes were a contract. These were a plea. Liza sat in the small, cold cabin, clutching the real letters to her chest. A single tear traced a path through the dust on her cheek. She was not crying for her fear, or her scars, or the ambush. She was crying for the lost hope in a dead woman's handwriting, a genuine love that had been promised, but had never arrived. The dawn was a blade of gray steel. Nisoe was already mounted, a motionless silhouette against the pale eastern light. He had not come to the house, but waited by the dry creek bed. Cole emerged from his barn, his face set. He had spent the night staring at the forged letters, the rage inside him a cold, hard knot. He saddled his own horse and the gentlest mare in his string, a small buckskin. Liza came out of Maggie's cabin, wearing her own sturdy traveling dress and Cole's heavy coat. She had slept little. "You are coming," Cole stated. It was not a question. "You need to see what he is doing." "I can ride," she said. "We will see," he replied. He helped her mount. His hand on her elbow was brief and impersonal. They rode out. The three of them. In a tense triangle, Cole leading, Liza beside him, and Nisoi flanking them 20 yards to the south, his eyes constantly scanning the ridges. Nisoi led them 2 miles up the shrinking Red Elk Creek, into the hills where the water was supposed to be born. They found the dam just after sunrise. It was an ugly, fresh scar in the earth, a wide barrier of raw pine logs and packed mud. It stretched 50 yards across the canyon, blocking the main fork of the creek. The water behind it was already pooling, still and dark. On the south side of the dam, a wide, newly dug ditch angled away, diverting the stolen water toward the flatlands owned by the railroad. Cole dismounted and walked to the edge. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of his boots on the packed earth. The creek bed below the dam was not just low, it was nearly dry, a pathetic ribbon of mud. "He is killing the creek," Cole said, his voice quiet, which was more frightening than if he had yelled. Nisoi pointed with his chin toward a wooden stake hammered into the bank. Liza, who had followed Cole, saw the brand. It was not a cattle brand. It was a neat, professional stamp K and Company. "The survey stakes," Liza said, pointing to 3 more. "They are everywhere. This is an enormous amount of work. It is not a secret. He wants you to see it." "He wants me to know I am beaten," Cole said. Nisoi knelt by the ditch. "The water is strong here. It moves fast. It will drain the high pastures in 1 week. My people's horses, they will have nothing." Cole looked at the Cheyenne warrior. In that moment, the years of distrust, the old hatreds, were burned away by a shared, cold fury. Kincaid was not just stealing from one of them. He was stealing from them all. On the ride back, they took a different route, cutting through a high stand of pine where a small logging camp was operation. A man with a broad, yellow beard, known only as Swede, was sharpening a saw. He looked up, his eyes wary. As Cole and Liza approached, Nisoi remained in the trees, a watchful presence. "Morning, McKenna," Swede said, not stopping his work. "You are cutting for Kincaid," Cole said. "I cut for pay," Swede replied. "He pays in cash, not like some." "You built that dam," Cole said, his hand resting on his saddle horn. Swede finally stopped, the file whining to a halt. "I cut the logs. Where they end up is Kincaid's business. I keep my head down." "Have you seen anything else?" Liza asked, leaning forward, her voice, clear and feminine, surprised the logger. "Anything unusual up here at night?" Swede looked at her, his gaze lingering, then looked away. "You should not be here, ma'am. This is no place for—" "Please," Liza said, "it is important." He sighed, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "Wagons," he muttered, "maybe 3, 4 times. In the last few months, always at night. They use the old fire road. They do not use lights." "Wagons carrying what?" Cole asked. "Not lumber," Swede said, lowering his voice. "They are covered, and they are quiet. Too quiet. But one night, one of them hit a rut. I heard, well, it sounded like crying." He looked at Liza, his face uneasy. "Like women." Liza felt the blood drain from her face. "Did you see them?" "I saw one. A girl. She looked like, well, she looked like she just got off the stage. Fancy hat. She never made it to town. Though none of them did. Some folks just vanish. From the stop. From the hotel. The forged letters. The ambush. The wagons. It was a net. A wide, dark net." "Why did you not tell the marshal?" Liza asked. Swede gave a short, bitter laugh. "Tell DeWitt he probably holds the lantern for them. I told you, I keep my head down. You should too, ma'am." Cole's face was stone. He had said nothing. He turned his horse. "Thank you for the information, Swede," as they rode away. Liza looked back. The logger was already filing his saw, the rhythmic, metallic scrape the only sound in the high, cold air. When they returned to the ranch, Cole's mood was foul. He saw Liza looking at the horses in the corral. "If you are staying," he said gruffly, "you cannot be a liability. You will learn to ride properly, not side saddle. You will learn to work." He was a harsh teacher. He put her on a young gelding, taught her to saddle it herself, to balance, to grip with her legs, not the reins. The first time the horse trotted, she fell. She landed hard in the dust, the air knocked from her lungs, her shoulder aching. She lay there for a second, the shame and the pain washing over her. "Get up," Cole said. His voice was not unkind, but it was inflexible. She got up. She pulled the dust from her coat, grabbed the reins, and pulled herself back into the saddle. She rode for 3 hours. She learned. By the time the sun was high, a new, grudging respect had formed between them. He saw her endurance. She saw the patience beneath his rough commands. The next day, the first confrontation happened. Cole and Liza were mending a harness in the barn when they heard the snap of wire. Cole was moving before the sound faded. He grabbed his rifle and ran toward the south pasture. Liza was right behind him. 3 men on horseback were systematically cutting his fence. They were not the ambushers, but they had the same hard, careless look. They were Kincaid's men. "That is far enough," Cole yelled, raising his rifle. The men laughed. One of them, a heavy man with a greasy vest, spit tobacco juice. "This ain't your land no more. McKenna, the water is gone. You are just trespassing." He pulled his own revolver. Cole cocked his rifle. Blood was roaring in his ears. A hawk cried, piercing and sharp, from the rocks above. The man in the vest froze. "What in the hell?" Nisoe's horse seemed to fall from the rocks. Landing in the pasture, he was not alone. 2 other Cheyenne riders, their faces painted, were with him. They did not draw guns. They carried only short bows and rawhide lariats. Before the 3 men could react, the Cheyenne were on them. It was not a fight, it was a demonstration. They circled the men, a whirlwind of dust and hooves, whooping and yelling. One rider snatched the rifle from the heavy man's scabbard. Nisoe used his lariat, the loop settling perfectly over the man's shoulders, and yanked him from the saddle. The man hit the ground hard. The other 2 men turned to run. The Cheyenne riders cut their saddle girths with quick, flashing knives. As the men spurred their horses, the saddles slipped, dumping them ignominiously into the sagebrush. The 3 Cheyenne riders collected the guns, rounded up the men's horses, and herded them away. They left the 3 gunmen, disarmed, unhorsed, and covered in dust, 5 miles from town. It was a profound humiliation, delivered without a single bullet. Cole stood, his rifle still raised, his knuckles white. He had been ready to kill. Nisoe had simply shamed them. The Cheyenne warrior looked back at Cole, then drove the captured horses into the hills. The truce was now an alliance. That evening, the tension in Maggie's cabin was different. It was no longer just fear. It was the quiet hum of a shared fight. Liza was cleaning Cole's rifle. Cole was staring at the small box that held Maggie's real letters. He picked one up, his large, calloused thumb tracing the faded script. "She had a good hand," he said, his voice thick. "She loved words." "Yes," Liza said quietly. "She did." He looked at her, the shame of his illiteracy a physical weight on him. I do not know what they say. Not really. I remember what she told me she wrote, but I never really knew." Liza put down the rifle. She went and sat at the small table. "I will read them to you, if you like." He nodded, a jerky, stiff motion. She read the first one, the one she had read the night before. She read of his loneliness, of his love for the horses, of Maggie's fierce, protective hope for her brother. When she finished, Cole's eyes were closed. "She always saw better than me," he whispered. "She wanted you to be happy," Liza said. "She wanted me to be whole." He opened his eyes, and the shame was replaced by a raw vulnerability. She tried to teach me, to read. I was too stubborn, too angry. After the war, I told her I had no need for words. Liza picked up the letter. It is not too late. He looked at her, confused. I will teach you, she said, if you let me, the way she wanted. He was stiff with pride. I am not a child. No, she said, her voice gentle. You are a man who needs to read his sister's words, and you are a man who needs to read the papers Kincaid will try to make you sign. That hit him. The practical, the weapon. She pointed to the top of the page. This is an M, for McKenna, for Maggie. He sat beside her. He was clumsy, his large hand scarred and stiff, but he repeated the letter. M. She pointed to the next, They worked for an hour. It was slow, agonizing work for him. But as he finally managed to sound out his sister's name, Maggie, a rough, small sound came from his throat. It was the first time she had heard him laugh. It was a sound like stones moving. The intimacy of the moment, the shared secret, loosened something in Liza. He had shared his deepest shame. She would share hers. He taught me to read, Liza said, her voice quiet, her hand straying to the high collar of her dress. Your father? Cole asked, his voice still rough from sounding out the letters. Yes, he was a clerk. He believed in numbers. He believed they were honest. She stopped, her hand tightening on the collar. He worked for a large gambling syndicate. He kept their books, until he found out they were fixing the games, cheating the minors. He was an honest man. Mr. McKenna, he was going to go to the law. Cole watched her, his face unreadable in the lantern light. They warned him, she said, her voice becoming thin, metallic. He did not listen. So, they decided to burn the evidence. They burned the ledgers, and they burned the clerk who wrote them. She looked at him, her eyes wide and dark with the memory. It was not an accident. They barred the doors. My room was in the back. He got me to a window. He pushed me out, but I was burned. She finally touched the scar, her fingers tracing the ridge of it through the fabric. He did not get out. She took a shaky breath. I was an orphan, with this, she gestured to her neck. I had no money, no prospects. When I saw the advertisement, the marriage proposal, it was not romance. Mr. McKenna, it was an escape. It was the only future I could buy. I was selling myself to be safe. Cole said nothing for a long time. He looked at her, truly seeing the steel beneath the frail exterior. He had been broken by one death. She had been forged by one. He had hidden himself away. Let his world shrink. Let his sister's words turn to dust. This woman, burned and orphaned, had crossed a continent, faced an ambush, and was now offering to teach him to read, all while staring down the man who was trying to destroy them. He stood up. He walked to the cabin's small window, looking out at the dark ranch. When Maggie died, he said, his back to her. I quit. I stopped fighting. I just held on, but I quit. I let the ranch go. I let myself go. He turned to face her. I will not quit again. He can have his dam. He can have his hired guns. He will not have this ranch. And he will not have us. He had said us. The word hung in the air, a fragile new thing. The sound of a horse made them both start. Cole grabbed his rifle, his new resolve hardening his face. He stepped outside. Silas Kincaid was sitting on the porch of the main house, as if he owned it. He was smoking a cigar, the red tip glowing in the dark. Marshal DeWitt stood beside him, a silent, uniformed shadow. Mr. McKenna, Kincaid said, his voice smooth and pleasant. A lovely evening for a ride. I was just admiring your dry property. It is a shame. Get off my land, Cole said, his voice a low growl. In a moment, Kincaid said, ignoring the rifle. "I have come to make you a final offer. Out of respect for your hard work, my company is prepared to offer you $500 cash for this patch of dust. A generous offer, considering the drought." "It is not a drought," Liza said, stepping out to stand beside Cole. "It is theft." Kincaid's smile widened. He looked at Liza, his eyes sliding over her. "Ah, the mail-order bride. You survived the gulch. How resilient. I do hope you enjoy your stay, however brief." He stood, brushing ash from his fine suit. "The offer is $500. You have until noon tomorrow to accept it at my office. If you refuse—" He gestured with his cigar toward the dry creek bed. "Well, the railroad requires a great deal of water, and that new ditch will be very, very thirsty this summer. I'm afraid there will not be a drop left for you." He tipped his hat. "Good evening, Mr. McKenna, ma'am." He and DeWitt mounted their horses and rode away, the sound of their hooves fading into the night. The machine was grinding. The ultimatum had been delivered. The wake of Kincaid's departure left a silence that was heavier and more toxic than the thick, stagnant air. The sky to the west, which had been a bruised purple, was now turning a sickly, sulphurous black. The wind had died, falling into a dead, breathless quiet. It was the calm that came before a beating. "Get inside," Cole said. His voice was flat. Liza looked at him. The rifle was still in his hand, but his shoulders were slumped. He looked like a man who had just been handed his own death sentence. "What will you do?" "He said noon," Cole said, his gaze fixed on the unnatural dark. "That gives us the night. I need to check the stock. A storm like this, they get spooked." "And the watcher?" she asked. He had almost forgotten. He cursed, low and bitter. "Let him watch. He will get cold. He will get wet. Go inside. Bolt the door." He did not wait for her reply, but strode toward the barn, his form swallowed instantly by the rising dark. Liza retreated into the small cabin. She bolted the door as he had said. The single room felt like a trap, a small wooden box. She could hear her own heart beating in the oppressive silence. She went to the table and, with a trembling hand, touched the box of Maggie's real letters. The paper felt warm, a last link to a life of decency, a life that now seemed impossible. The first gust of wind hit the cabin like a solid fist. The structure groaned, the old wood complaining. Liza startled, backing away from the walls. A second gust followed, and with it, the first sharp thwack of rain. It was not a drizzle, it was a volley, as if someone were throwing handfuls of gravel against the siding. The wind began to scream. It was not a whistle. It was a high, thin shriek that seemed to come from inside her own head. From the small, single-paned window, she saw a flicker of light Cole's lantern in the barn. He was fighting to secure the main door against the gale. Then another gust hit, and the barn light vanished, as if snuffed out by a giant hand. She waited. 1 minute, 2. The storm was a physical, roaring entity, trying to tear the small cabin from the earth. The floorboards vibrated. The cabin door was ripped open, not by the wind, but by him. Cole stumbled in, shoving the door shut against the hurricane. He slammed the heavy wooden bar into place. He was soaked. Water streamed from his hat, from his coat, puddling on the floor. "The main house!" he panted, pulling off his hat and slapping it against his thigh. "The wind! It blew out the lantern through the chimney. It is dark as a pit." The cabin was their only shelter, the only light, and it was a small, flickering island in a world of violent chaos. The single lantern on the table sputtered, its flame dancing wildly as the wind found every crack in the old walls. The window," Liza said, pointing. The old wooden shutter on the outside of the glass was rattling, the latch failing. As Cole turned toward it, a sound like a gunshot filled the room. The shutter was ripped from its hinges and vanished into the night. An instant later, the glass pane exploded inward. shattering across the floor. A wall of wind and ice-cold rain blasted into the cabin. The lantern flame was punched out, plunging the room into absolute, roaring blackness. Liza cried out, a short, sharp sound of shock as she was hit by the spray and the glass. "Get down!" Cole bellowed over the storm. She heard him moving, a large shape in the dark, fighting his way to the window. He was cursing, his voice a low rumble against the shrieking wind, as he tried to pull the small table in front of the opening to block the worst of it. Lightning cracked, a brilliant blue-white flash that illuminated the room for a single, terrible second. Liza was pressed against the far wall, her hands to her mouth, her dress already plastered to her body from the spray. Cole had his shoulder to the table, bracing it against the hole. "Match!" he yelled. "On the stove!" Her fingers fumbled on the small shelf. She found the tin box, struck a match. Her hand was shaking so badly it took 3 tries. The small flame flared, tiny and brave. She carried it to the lantern, her other hand cupped around the weak light. The wick caught. The lantern's oily, yellow glow returned, pushing back the dark. Cole had managed to wedge the table, but the rain was still pouring in, soaking the floor. He turned, breathing heavily, and the first thing he saw was her. She was standing in the middle of the room, shivering. The cheap, dark fabric of her dress was black with rainwater, clinging to every line of her body. The starched collar, her shield, had been soaked limp. It had fallen open. Everything was visible. In the wavering light, the scar tissue was pale and stark against her skin. It ran from the hollow of her throat, down, disappearing into the bodice of her dress. It was not a small mark. It was a map of ruin, slick with rain, the old, puckered skin pulling tight as she shivered. Liza saw him looking. She did not see neutrality in his eyes. She saw only the stare. It was the look she had fled from, the look of pity, the look of disgust. Her breath hitched. She was frozen. She could not speak. She could not move. Her hands flew up, clumsy and late, trying to pull the wet fabric closed, trying to hide the unhideable. She turned away from him, her shoulders hunching. Shame, a colder, more violent force than the storm. She was ugly. She was damaged. She was a fraud. Cole did not move for a full second. He saw the scar, but he saw the woman. He saw the fire that had put it there. He saw the terror in her eyes, a terror that was not of the storm, but of him, of his gaze. The title of their unspoken, unwritten contract hung in the air. Mail-order bride hid her scars from the past. He did not speak. He did not offer empty comfort. He moved. He crossed the small room in 2 strides, past the broken glass. He ripped the heavy wool blanket from Maggie's cot. Liza flinched as he came up behind her, expecting she did not know what. He did not touch her skin. He wrapped the heavy, dry blanket around her, pulling it tight, covering her from her shoulders to her knees. It was an act of shielding, an act of possession. It was not gentle, but it was absolute. His large, calloused hands rested on her shoulders, the warmth and weight of them pinning the blanket in place. She looked up at him over her shoulder, her eyes wide, tears mixing with the rainwater on her cheeks. Yet the rough rancher saw only her beauty. He was not looking at her throat. He was looking at her eyes. He saw the endurance that had brought her here. He saw the fight that had kept her alive. He saw the woman who had offered to teach him to read. That was her beauty. It was the only kind he understood. "You are safe," he said. His voice was rough, low. "Here, with me, you are safe, Liza." She stopped shaking. She clutched the blanket to her chest, her fingers digging into the wool. He did not turn away. He did not look away. He had seen the worst of her, the secret she had guarded with her life, and he had not flinched. He had covered her. He let go and turned back to the window, his face grim. "We must plug that hole." The storm raged for another hour. They worked together, using wood from the small wood pile, bracing it against the table. By the time they were done, the cabin was a fortress, but the floor was covered in water and glass. The wind still shrieked, but the rain was no longer getting in. They were freezing. "You must get out of those wet things," Cole said gruffly, not looking at her. "You will catch your death." She clutched the blanket tighter. "I have nothing else." He went to the small chest of drawers that held Maggie's few remaining things. He pulled out a long, flannel nightgown. "Here," he said, handing it to her. His back turned. "Change. I will not look." She was too cold to be proud. She turned to the darkest corner of the cabin and, under the cover of the heavy blanket, she shimmied out of the wet dress. The wool of the blanket was rough against her scarred skin. She pulled the warm, dry flannel over her head. It smelled of lavender and old, faded roses. It smelled like Maggie. She left the wet dress in a heap on the floor. I am decent." He turned. He had taken off his own sodden coat and was trying to dry his hair with a rag. He looked at her, standing there in his sister's nightgown, the wool blanket still draped over her shoulders. He nodded, a single sharp dip of his chin. "Good." The cabin was ice cold. The small stove was meant for cooking, not for heating, and the wind was pulling the warmth up the flue. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the cot. She sat. He sat beside her. Not close, but not far. They sat in silence, listening to the world try to tear itself apart outside. The lantern light was their only anchor. The sound of the wind was so loud, it was its own kind of silence. But in the lulls, when the screaming eased for a moment, another sound became clear. Her breathing, his breathing. It was a slow, steady rhythm in the chaos. The sound of two people, trapped, waiting. It was an intimacy more profound than any touch. Liza felt the wall of her fear begin to crumble. She was not alone in the dark. A sudden, brilliant flash of lightning lit the room, even through the plugged window. It was followed by a crack of thunder so loud, the cabin shook. Liza jumped, stifling a cry. "It is close," Cole said. I thought I saw something," Liza whispered, staring at the gaps in their makeshift barricade. "The wind," Cole said. "No, before, when the shutter broke, I thought I saw a light near the barn." Cole went still. The cigar. Kincaid's watcher. "Stay here," he said. He moved to the lantern. "What are you doing?" "He might still be out there. The light, it makes us a target." He blew out the flame. The darkness was absolute. The roar of the storm seemed to double in volume. Liza felt a spike of pure, primal fear. "Cole," she whispered. "I am here." His voice came from the blackness, close to the door. "Do not move." She heard the faint scrape of the door bar being lifted. The wind tore at the wood. He cracked the door. Just an inch. He was peering into the maelstrom, a world of driving rain and utter black. Another flash of lightning. It lasted only a second, but it illuminated the ranch yard in stark, momentary daylight. Cole saw him. The watcher. He was no longer by the barn. He was huddled against the lee side of the main house porch, not 30 yards away. He was staring right at Maggie's cabin. Cole shut the door, ramming the bar back into place. The sound of it was violent. Liza heard him move back, his boots splashing in the water on the floor. "He is there." Cole's voice was a low growl in the dark. "Kincaid's man. He is watching the cabin." "In this," Liza whispered, horrified. "What kind of man?" "The kind Kincaid pays," Cole said. "He wants to make sure we do not run." "Or," Liza said, her voice trembling, "he is waiting for the storm to end so he can finish the ambush." The thought hung in the dark. They were pinned down, trapped by the storm, watched by a killer. They sat in the dark. The cold was brutal. "We cannot just wait here for him," Liza said. We cannot go out there, Cole replied. A long silence, filled only by the wind. Cole, Liza's voice was small. I am here. I found another letter in the box. It was at the very bottom. I have it. She fumbled in the dark for the small, precious bundle. I cannot read it. Strike a match, Cole said. He will see the light, she said. He already knows we are in here, Cole said. He knows we are trapped. Strike it. She heard him move, scraping the table to find the match tin. A match flared. Cole held the small flame, cupping it in his large hand. Read, he said. Liza unfolded the last, fragile piece of paper. The handwriting was Maggie's, but it was not addressed to Cole. It was addressed to my brother's wife. Her voice shook, but she read the words aloud, the small flame flickering on her face. On the paper. I do not know your name, she read. I do not know if you will ever read this. I am writing it because I am sick, and I am afraid to leave him alone. I pray that my brother, Cole, has found you. I pray he has learned to open his heart. Cole's hand, holding the match, was rock steady. He is a good man, Liza continued, her voice thick with emotion. But he is closed up. The war, it hurt him in ways he will not speak of. He needs someone to remind him how to live. Do not be afraid of his silence. His heart is good. He forgets how to use it. The match was burning low. Love this land for him. Liza read, her own tears starting to fall. Love his horses, and please, if you can, love him. He has been alone for far too long. He deserves a home, Maggie. The match burned Cole's fingers. He dropped it. It hissed out on the wet floor. The darkness that returned was different. It was filled with the voice of a ghost. Cole's voice was choked. She was saying goodbye. She was passing it on, Liza whispered. To whoever came next. She was giving her blessing. Cole stood. He went to the dark, plugged window. He was staring at the storm, at the Watcher, at the world that Kincaid was trying to steal. He used her, Cole said, his voice a low, vibrating engine of rage. Kincaid, his forger, he used her memory, he used her hope to set a trap, to bring you here, to destroy this ranch. Yes, Liza said, her voice gaining strength. He gave us until noon, Cole said. He thinks he has us. He thinks we are trapped here, cold and afraid, waiting for him to take everything. Are we? Liza asked. No, Cole said. We are not. He turned, a large shadow in the dark. The storm will break before dawn. That Watcher, he will be cold. He will be tired. He will not expect us to move. Move where? To the dam, Cole said, his voice hard as iron. Kincaid's army is in town, but his weakness is on the creek. He cannot guard it all. Ni soe, Liza breathed. He will be there. He will be there, Cole agreed. We are not selling. We are not running. We are going to take back our water. Kincaid wants a fight. He will get one. The fear was still there, a cold knot in Liza's stomach, but something else was there. Resolve. What about me? She asked. I am not a fighter. You are in this, Cole said, his voice absolute. You were right from the start. You are not a liability. You are the reason. I will not leave you here for that man to find when he sees we are gone. You ride with me. He was not asking. He was telling her. He was protecting her, but he was also including her. She stood up, clutching the blanket, Maggie's nightgown warm against her skin, the scar beneath it suddenly irrelevant. I am not a mail-order bride anymore, Liza said, her voice clear and steady in the dark. I am not running. I will ride with you. I am your partner. She heard him nod in the dark. Get some rest. Dawn comes fast. The storm had passed, but the world it left behind was a ruin. The pre-dawn light was a watery, bruised gray, revealing a landscape scoured by the wind and choked with mud. The air was unnaturally still, cold, and sharp. Cole moved first. He was dressed in dark canvas, his rifle in his hand. Liza was beside him, her own traveling dress the only other clothing she had. She had pulled her hair back tightly, her face pale but set. She carried the box of Maggie's letters. "He is still there," Cole whispered, his voice a low vibration. He peered through the gap in their makeshift window barricade. The watcher was huddled against the main house porch, a miserable, sodden lump. He was not watching the cabin. He was asleep, or half frozen, his head slumped on his chest. "I will handle him," Cole said. "Wait for my signal." "No," Liza said, her voice quiet but inflexible. "He is one of Kincaid's men. We need to know what he knows. We need him alive." Cole looked at her, surprised by the cold, strategic turn of her mind. "He will make noise." "Not if you are persuasive," she said. Cole gave a grim nod. He slipped out of the cabin, silent as the fog rising from the wet ground. He did not go straight across the yard. He moved left, using the damaged barn as cover, circling behind the main house. Liza watched from the door, her heart a cold stone in her chest. She saw Cole emerge from the shadows behind the porch. He was 10 feet away. The man never heard him. Cole moved in a single, fluid motion. One hand covered the man's mouth. The other slammed the barrel of his revolver against the man's temple. It was not a killing blow. It was a stunning one. The man grunted and went limp. Cole tied and gagged him with speed, dragging him into the mudroom of the main house. He left him there, a prisoner in the cold, dark kitchen. Cole returned to the cabin. "It is done." "Did he—" "He is alive," Cole said. "He is not the problem. The men at the dam are the problem. Let us ride." They saddled the horses in the barn, the smell of wet animals and hay thick in the air. Cole handed Liza a carbine, a shorter, lighter rifle. "You know how to use this?" I have fired one. At a fair," she said, her voice small. "It is not a fair," Cole said. "Point it. Pull the trigger. Do not think. Just do. We are not going there to talk." They rode out, keeping to the low draws, the horses' hooves sucking at the thick mud. The rising sun was hidden behind a thick bank of clouds, but the world was getting brighter, the shadows shrinking. They found Nisoe in the hills above the dam, just as Cole had predicted. He was not alone. 2 other Cheyenne warriors were with him, their faces grim, their ponies standing stock still. They were all soaked, but they seemed untroubled by the cold. "He knows we are coming," Nisoe said. He did not greet them. "How?" Cole asked, dismounting. "Smoke," Nisoe said, pointing. A thin, lazy plume of gray smoke was rising from the tent camp set up beside the dam. "They have a fire. They are careless. 4 men, 2 on patrol, 2 at the fire." "And 1 more," Liza said, looking back toward the ranch. "The one we left tied up." Nisoe's eyes rested on her. He saw the carbine in her hands. He nodded, a small sign of approval. "Here is the plan," Cole said, his voice low and urgent. "Kincaid wants this dam. We cannot destroy the whole thing, but we can destroy his ditch, the sluice gate. If we break that, the water will have nowhere to go but back to the Red Elk. The pressure will do the rest." "The 2 men on patrol," Nisoe said. "They are ours." He and his warriors melted into the wet rocks, vanishing. "What do we do?" Liza asked, her hands slick on the rifle. "We wait for the signal," Cole said. "Then we take the 2 men at the fire. We need one of them. We need the one who wrote the letters." "How do you know he is here?" "Kincaid would not leave his pet forger in town," Not after we questioned Fields. Cole said he would keep him close. He is here. They waited. The silence was absolute, broken only by the drip of water from the pines and the distant, hungry roar of the water pooling behind the dam. A hawk cried. Once. Cole stood. Now. He and Liza moved down the muddy slope, using the noise of the spillway to cover their approach. They reached the edge of the clearing. 2 men were huddled over the fire, trying to dry their clothes. One was a broad, dirty man with 2 pistols. The other was smaller, wearing a town coat, his hands held out to the flames. He looked pale and sick. "I hate this," the small man whined. "I am a clerk, not a soldier." "Shut up, Phillips," the gunman snarled. "Kincaid pays you good. You write your little letters, and you keep your mouth shut." Liza's breath caught in her throat. "Phillips, the clerk from the post office. The forger." Cole stepped into the clearing. "Get your hands up, both of you." The gunman, Phillips, spun around. The large man reacted instantly, his hand diving for his pistol. A sound like a wet thump echoed in the clearing. An arrow, fletched in black, appeared high in the gunman's chest. He looked down at it, his face a mask of stupid surprise, before he crumpled forward into the fire. The clerk, Phillips, shrieked, falling backward into the mud. "Do not move," Cole said, his rifle centered on the man's head. From the rocks, Nisoi emerged, his short bow in his hand. He was followed by his 2 warriors. They moved to the other 2 patrolmen, who were lying silent on the ridge, their throats cut. "He is the one," Liza said, her voice shaking but full of ice. She stepped forward, the carbine held low. "You are Phillips." I, please do not kill me," Phillips sobbed, snot and tears mixing with the mud on his face. "He made me, Kincaid made me." "The letters," Liza said, her voice like a whip. "You wrote them." Yes, he found the old ones, the ones the girl, Maggie, wrote years ago. He told me to copy the idea, to write to women. Dozens of them. We have a list." "Where are they?" Cole's voice was a low growl of thunder. "The women who came here. The ones from the wagons." "I do not know," Phillips shrieked. He takes them to a camp, up north. He holds them. He uses them. He tells the ranchers, the ones who will not sell, that their new brides are safe with him. Until they sign the deeds, it is all about the land." The sheer, cold evil of it struck Liza dumb. It was not just water. It was not just letters. It was a factory of despair. "We have him," Cole said. He looked at Nisoi. "It is time." "Liza," Cole commanded. "The sluice gate, the main lever, go!" Liza ran. She knew what to do. The sluice was a heavy wooden gate that diverted the water into Kincaid's new ditch. It was held in place by a thick iron lever, which was itself locked by a heavy wooden pin. She put her shoulder to the lever. It did not budge. The pressure of the water behind it was too great. "I cannot move it," she yelled. "Use the rifle," Cole shouted, his own gun still on Phillips. Liza looked at the carbine. She did not have the strength, but she had the leverage. She jammed the steel barrel of the rifle into the gap between the lever and the frame, where the pin was. "Cole," she yelled, "I need help." Nisoi was beside her. He did not speak. He put his hands on the rifle barrel with hers. "Now," he said. They threw their combined weight against it. The wood groaned. "Again," Niso commanded. They pushed. The rifle barrel bent, but the wooden pin snapped with a sound like a pistol shot. The iron lever, freed, flew back with the force of a cannon. It slammed Liza and Niso backward into the mud. With a sound like a dragon waking, the sluice gate burst open. A solid 10-foot wall of black water exploded from the dam. It did not flow into the ditch. It hit the dry, waiting bed of the Red Elk Creek. The roar was deafening. The stolen river was going home. A shout from the ridge. There, down there, they are destroying the dam. Cole grabbed Phillips by the collar, hauling him to his feet. Stay with me, or you are dead. Hoofbeats. 12, maybe more. Marshal DeWitt and a posse of 10 men thundered into the clearing. They were not townsfolk. They were Kincaid's hired guns, all of them now wearing shining new badges. McKenna, DeWitt roared, reining in his horse. Drop your weapons. You are all under arrest for the destruction of private property. Sabotage. DeWitt, you fool! Cole yelled over the roar of the water. This is your man Phillips. He confessed Kincaid is forging deeds. He is kidnapping women. DeWitt's face was smug. I do not know what you are talking about. All I see are 3 murderers and a vandalized dam. Take them. The posse raised their rifles. Hold on, Marshal! A new voice boomed. A wagon clattered into the clearing, pulled by 2 huge draft horses. Peterson, the blacksmith, stood at the reins, his huge hammer in his hand. Beside him, in a smaller buckboard, was Mrs. Hollis, the storekeeper, her face a grim mask. We heard the water, Peterson said, his voice slow and deep. We came to see. What is the meaning of this? DeWitt, why are you pointing guns at Cole McKenna? Stay out of this. Peterson, DeWitt snapped. This is law business. These 3 are fugitives. A single, clean-looking rider came through the posse. Silas Kincaid. He was immaculate, his black coat untouched by mud. He looked at the destroyed sluice, at the water pouring back into the creek, and his face was calm. A setback, he said, his voice pleasant. Marshal, it seems Mr. McKenna has refused my generous offer. He pulled a document from his coat. A pity. This is a territorial injunction, granting me full control of the Red Elk water source. You are, all of you, trespassing. Your paper is a lie, Liza screamed, her voice hoarse. Just like your letters. Kincaid smiled at her. Hysteria, my dear. It is so unbecoming. He nodded to DeWitt. Do your duty, Marshal. Arrest them all, including these meddling shopkeepers. DeWitt's men cocked their rifles. Cole, Nisoe, and Liza were surrounded. Peterson and Hollis were unarmed. It was over. A shot cracked from the high ridge. It was not from DeWitt's men. Cole, Nisoe yelled, shoving him. The bullet, meant for Cole's heart, tore through the fleshy part of Nisoe's shoulder. The warrior grunted, stumbling to one knee, his bow clattering on the rocks. Liza did not think. She screamed, a sound of pure rage, and ripped a long, clean strip of fabric from her petticoat. She ran to Nisoe, shoving herself between him and the snipers, and pressed the makeshift bandage hard against the bleeding wound. Hold it, she commanded. Hold it tight. It was the opening Cole needed. DeWitt, he roared. You want this land? He grabbed Phillips, shoving the whimpering clerk toward Peterson. He is the witness, take him. Peterson did not hesitate. The blacksmith's huge arm shot out, grabbing Phillips and dragging him into the wagon. Kincaid screamed, No, stop him, shoot them! The posse turned, confused. Cole had already reached his horse. From his saddlebag, he pulled a small, oilcloth-wrapped bundle. It was a stick of blasting powder from the logging camp. He lit the fuse. This is not your land. Kincaid, Cole yelled. He did not throw it at the men. He threw it at the unstable cliff face just above the dam, the rock already weakened by the storm. Cover, DeWitt shrieked. The explosion was not massive, but it was perfectly placed. A slab of the canyon wall, tons of rock and mud. Tore free, it crashed down into the pooling water, right where the dam structure stood. The dam did not just break, it evaporated. A wall of rock, mud, and liberated water exploded outward. DeWitt's posse scattered, horses screaming in terror. Kincaid's fine horse reared, throwing him into the mud. Smoke and stone dust filled the air. "Now!" Cole yelled. He grabbed Liza, hauling her onto her horse and slapping its rump. He swung onto his own. Nisoi, bleeding but moving, leaped onto Cole's horse, sitting behind him. "Peterson Hollis," Cole bellowed. "Get to town, barricade the jail, protect the witness." Through the choking dust, Liza saw Peterson's wagon thundering away, the blacksmith whipping the horses, the clerk Phillips tied up in the back. Misses. Hollis was right behind him. DeWitt was on his feet, firing his pistol blindly into the smoke. "Do not let them escape, shoot them." But it was too late. Cole, Liza, and the wounded Nisoi spurred their horses into a narrow side canyon, the roar of the liberated river and the curses of Kincaid fading behind them. They were fugitives. They were wounded, but the water was free. They rode for hours, pushing the horses through a maze of canyons and alkali flats where DeWitt's posse would never follow. The land was hostile, a broken-toothed geography of sharp shadows and blinding sun. Nisoi, riding behind Cole, was a silent, bleeding weight. His strength was failing. "We must stop," Cole said, his voice flat. He reined in, scanning the sheer rock walls that surrounded them. "Not here." Nisoe's voice was a dry rasp. He slid from the horse before Cole could help him, his legs buckling. He caught himself against the hot stone. "This way." He led them, half walking, half stumbling, toward what looked like a solid cliff face. Liza, carrying her carbine, and Cole, supporting the warrior, followed. Nisoi pushed aside a curtain of ancient, dry scrub and revealed a fissure in the rock, a crack barely wide enough for a man to pass. They tied the horses, leaving them in the thin shade. They squeezed through the narrow passage, and the world changed. The passage opened into a high-walled, hidden basin. A perfect circle of stone opened to the sky, perhaps 200 yards across. It was silent, protected from the wind. In the center, a collection of enormous, smooth boulders rested, as if placed there by a thoughtful giant. "The place of the white stones," Nisoi whispered. He sank to the ground, his back against the largest stone, his face pale and beaded with sweat. Liza ran to a dark patch of green in the rock wall. A small spring, a bare trickle of water, seeped from the stone. It was clean and cold. She soaked her handkerchief and brought it to Nisoi. "The bullet," she said to Cole, her voice all business. "We must see." Cole gently cut the makeshift bandage away. The bullet had torn through the heavy muscle of Nisoi's shoulder. It was a clean wound, passing straight through, but it had bled heavily. "You are fortunate," Liza said, her voice shaking slightly, but her hands were steady. She tore another long, clean strip from her petticoat and began to wash the wound with the precious, clean water. Nisoi watched her. He watched her fingers, deft and gentle, cleaning the grit from his skin. He watched her eyes, which were not filled with pity, but with a fierce, concentrated anger. "You fight like a woman," he said, the words costing him. "I am glad you are not dead," she said, pulling the new bandage tight. She secured it, her touch firm. She looked him in the eye, and the shared terror of the dam, the shared defiance, passed between them. "Thank you," she whispered. My brother of freedom?" A smile, so rare it was startling, touched the corners of Nisoi's mouth. It vanished as quickly as it came. Cole stood guard at the entrance, his rifle resting in the crook of his arm. "What is this place, Nisoi?" "It is a holy place," Nisoi said, his voice stronger now with the water. "Our old ones came here, before the horse, before the gun. They came here to speak to the sky." He looked up at the perfect circle of blue above them. "The grandfathers taught us that a truth spoken in shadow is a lie. Only the truth that can stand in the white light of noon is real. It must be brought before the sun, for all to see." Liza and Cole looked at each other. Truth in the light. "He is right," Liza said. "We cannot hide here. Peterson and Hollis. They have the witness, but Kincaid has the guns. He will silence them." "He will," Cole agreed. He was restless, pacing the small sanctuary. He pulled the crumpled injunction paper from his pocket, the one Kincaid had waved in his face. He stared at the complex, official script. He called this law. He said it gives him the water. He said it with DeWitt beside him. He looked at Liza, his frustration a raw, physical thing. "I cannot read the damn thing." "I can," Liza said. She sat beside Nisohe, pulling her knees up. "And so can you. We will read it, right now." She took the paper. She smoothed it on the flat stone. The literacy lesson in Maggie's cabin felt like a lifetime ago, a game played by children. This was a war. "This word," she said, her finger jabbing the page. "Authority. It means power. And this one, territorial. He claims the Wyoming Territory gave him the water." Cole sounded out the words, his brow furrowed, his voice a low growl. He was slow, but the anger made him sharp. "Exclusive. Rights. Red Elk. Watershed." He finished, his fist crashing down on the stone. "He is a liar, and he is a fool." Liza looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "The territory cannot grant water rights," Cole said, the new knowledge giving him a hard certainty. "Not for a creek this size. It is federal land. Only the land office in Cheyenne, or Washington, can do that. That paper, it is worthless. It is just another forgery. He used it to scare DeWitt, to scare the town." He was using the words. He was fighting with them. Liza looked at the carbine resting against the rock. "Now my turn," she said. She stood. "Cole, teach me. Not to shoot at a fair. Teach me to fight." He picked up the carbine. His face was grim. "This is not a toy. You point. You breathe out. You squeeze. You do not pull." He made her stand, brace herself. He made her aim at a dark knot in a dead pine branch on the far side of the basin. "Dry fire," he commanded. "Again." She did, over and over. Her arms ached. "I cannot hold it steady." "You will," he said. Nisoe watched them, his dark eyes missing nothing. "You learn to fight with the white man's weapons," he said, his voice quiet. "We have to," Cole said. "They are not the strongest weapons," Nisoe said. He looked at Liza, then at Cole. "My people, we fought. We were brave, but we fought for yesterday. We fought to keep what was. Kincaid, he fights for tomorrow. He does not care about the land. He cares about the map. He cares about the paper." He gestured to the injunction in Cole's hand. "He fights with lies. We cannot win by hiding. We must meet him, in his town, in the daylight, with a truth that is stronger." "We will," Cole said. "But how do we tell the town Kincaid controls the telegraph? DeWitt controls the streets." Nisoe put 2 fingers to his lips and whistled, a low, trilling sound, the call of a meadowlark. They waited. 10 minutes later, a small, silent figure slipped through the crack in the rock. It was a Cheyenne boy, perhaps 13 years old, with sharp, intelligent eyes. He looked at Nisoe and spoke in their language. Niso translated. "Kincaid has the town locked down. DeWitt's men, the new ones, they are everywhere. But Peterson is in his smithy. Hollis is in her store. They hold the witness, Phillips, in the back room of the jail. But they cannot keep him long. DeWitt has the keys." "We have one chance," Liza said. She tore a blank page from the back of one of Maggie's letters. She found a small pencil in her reticule. "What are you doing?" Cole asked. "Nisoe is right. We need a truth in the daylight." Her pencil flew across the page, the writing clear and strong. She handed it to the boy. "Get this to Mrs. Hollis, no one else. Tell her to nail it to the church door. At midnight. Can you do that?" The boy looked at Nisoe, who nodded. The boy took the paper and vanished. "What did it say?" Cole asked. "It said, a trial. At noon tomorrow. In the main street. Let every man and woman who has lost land to Silas Kincaid come. Let every person who has been threatened for water come. We have the witness. We have the proof. Let the truth be seen in the light." It was a declaration of war. The waiting was the hardest part. The sun moved across the sky. The basin grew cold. The Cheyenne boy returned just as the sun was setting. He brought a pouch of dried meat, a canteen of water, and news. He spoke to Niso, his voice urgent. Niso's face hardened. "It is worse. Kincaid has made his move." "What move?" Cole said, standing. "The flyer is up, but Kincaid has posted his own. He claims the McKenna fugitives have joined the Cheyenne. He says we destroyed the dam as an act of war. He has hired a new team, 6 men, from out of the territory. He calls them regulators. They are assassins. He has given them authority to hunt us down. And he has given DeWitt permission to pacify the Cheyenne, to drive my people from the hills. To pacify, a clean word for massacre." "He is using us," Nisoe said, the pain in his shoulder forgotten, replaced by a cold rage. "He is using our fight to steal the rest of the land. If we hide, my people are attacked. If we fight, we are savages." "Then we do not fight him as savages," Cole said. "We fight him as citizens, in the street, at noon." He kicked at the sand in the center of the basin, clearing a wide, flat space. He picked up a stick. "The street, here." He drew a map of Red Bluff, the single main street, the cross streets, saloon, hotel. He sketched. Land office. Here, jail and marshal's office. Here. Blacksmith. Here. He looked at Liza, then Nisoe. "They will expect us to ride in, guns blazing. They will be on the roofs, the 6 assassins. They will be here, here, and here. They will cut us down before we cross the street," Niso said. "We will not cross the street," Cole said, his voice low. "We come from the alleys. Nisoe, you are the fastest. You take the north roofs, the saloon. I will take the south, the land office. We hunt the hunters." "What about me?" Liza asked, her voice quiet. Cole looked at her. "You are the center. You are the truth. You go to Peterson. You and Hollis. You bring the witness, Phillips, into the street. The people will be your shield. The assassins will be busy with us. You are the trial. You must make them listen." "They will shoot me," she said, her voice flat. "They will not," Nisoe said. "Not if the town is watching." "It is a desperate plan," Liza said. "It is all we have," Cole said. The night was cold. They took turns standing watch, but no one came. The sanctuary was safe. In the last, darkest hour before dawn, Liza found herself sitting next to Cole, both of them wrapped in blankets, staring at the impossible spray of stars above. "I am afraid," she whispered, her voice so quiet it was almost lost to the air. "I am not like you. Cole, I am not a fighter." He turned to her. In the faint starlight, he could see the pale oval of her face, the dark shadows of her eyes. He had seen her terror in the coach. He had seen her shame in the cabin. He had seen her rage at the dam. He reached out, his rough, calloused hand touching her cheek. His thumb brushed the rain-dampened hair from her temple. "You are not like me," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You are stronger. I have been running, or hiding, my whole life. From the war, from Maggie's death, from my own damned ignorance. I did not start fighting until you showed up." He looked at her, his gaze steady, burning. "Kincaid, his man, they forged those letters. They thought they were luring a perfect, quiet, obedient bride, someone to be a pawn, a victim." He shook his head. a small, rough movement. I do not need a perfect bride. Liza, I do not need a pawn. I need you, the real you, the one who was burned and did not break, the one who saw the truth, the one who is sitting here, terrified, and is still going to ride into that town. That is the woman I need. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing, a single tear escaping. Cole. We will not fail, he said. We will bring the truth into the light. The sun rose, a painful, blinding white. It was noon. They saddled the horses. Nisso's shoulder was stiff, but he moved with a fluid, deadly grace. Cole checked his rifle, his revolver, his face a mask of granite. Liza mounted the buckskin mare, the carbine resting in her lap. She was no longer a victim. She was a witness. They rode out of the sanctuary, single file. Through the crack in the stone, they crested the last high ridge that overlooked Red Bluff. The sun was directly behind them. The town, spread out below, was blind to their approach. All the watchers on the roofs would see were three dark silhouettes, three shapes of judgment, emerging from the white-hot fire of the sky. They began the long ride down. They did not ride into town together. They split at the base of the ridge, melting into the alleys and gulches that fed into Red Bluff like veins. Nisoe moved north, a shadow in the bright noon sun. He was Cheyenne. The town was built to see him, to hunt him. He moved through it unseen, his moccasins silent on the packed earth, his wounded shoulder a dull, hot ache. He scaled the rain barrel at the back of the saloon, gripped the edge of the roof, and pulled himself up. He lay flat, invisible, overlooking the street. Cole went south. He moved through the livery, his boots heavy but sure. He climbed an external ladder on the land office, Kincaid's own building, and settled himself behind the false front. He had a clear view of the hotel, the jail, and the street below. Liza rode alone. She rode the buckskin mare straight down the center of the street. Her back was straight, her hands steady on the reins, the carbine resting across her lap. She was no longer a bride. She was not a victim. She was the truth, riding into the light. The town was silent. It was not empty. People were there, but they were hidden, their faces pale blurs behind the dirty glass of their windows. They were waiting. They were terrified. On the roof of the hotel, a man in a new duster, a stranger, watched her approach. He adjusted his rifle, the sunlight glinting on the long barrel. On the roof of the feed store, two more men lay waiting. On the roof of the assay office, another. And on the saloon roof, Nisoe watched the first assassin, the one closest to him. The man had not seen him. Liza stopped her horse in the exact center of the town, equidistant from the saloon and the jail. The noon sun beat down, bleaching the color from the world. There was no shadow to hide in. The door to the marshal's office opened. Silas Kincaid stepped out, his suit immaculate. He was smiling. Marshal DeWitt followed, his face sweaty, his hand resting on his pistol. "Miss Mallory," Kincaid called, his voice booming with false confidence. "This is a foolish, foolish mistake. You are disrupting the peace. Marshal, arrest this woman." DeWitt licked his lips. He took one step forward. "Liza Mallory, I am ordering you to—" A sound cut him off. Clang. It was the sound of a heavy hammer on a heavy anvil. It rang out, clear and true as a church bell. Peterson the blacksmith stepped out of his smithy, his 16-pound hammer resting on his shoulder. He was a mountain of a man, his face grim. Clang! He struck the anvil again. "The town meeting is called." Marshal Peterson boomed. The door to the general store opened. "Mrs." Hollis stepped out, a shotgun cradled in her arms. "And we are all attending." Windows opened. Doors creaked. The silent watchers became a crowd. They were farmers whose creeks had run dry, miners who had been cheated, ranchers who had been threatened. They began to fill the street. "This is an illegal assembly," DeWitt shouted, his voice cracking. "Disperse! I order you to disperse!" "We are here for the witness, Mrs." Hollis shouted back. Her voice was clear and carried over the crowd. She held up the flyer Liza had written. "We are here for the truth." Peterson walked to the jail, unlocked the back door with a key he had clearly taken, and dragged the whimpering, terrified clerk, Phillips, into the sunlight. "Tell them," Peterson commanded, shaking the small man. "Tell them what you told me." Phillips fell to his knees. "He made me," he shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at Kincaid. "He made me do it all, the letters, the ambush, the women. He has a camp. He is holding them. He is a monster." Kincaid's smile faltered. He looked up at the roofs, at his hired men. "The man is a known liar. He is a thief. He stole from the post office. DeWitt, do your job." DeWitt drew his pistol, but he looked at Peterson, at Hollis, at the 50 angry faces surrounding him. He was licked. He hesitated. "It is true," a farmer in the back shouted. "My water is gone. He said the territory gave it to him." "He offered me $100 for my ranch," another yelled. $100. The crowd surged, an angry murmur turning into a roar. "Silence," Liza's voice cut through. She held up her hand. The carbine was still in her lap. "Mr. Kincaid did not just steal your water," she said, her voice clear and strong, reaching every ear. "He stole a man's name. He stole a woman's hope." She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out the bundle of forged letters. "These," she said, "are the letters he wrote, the lies he sent to desperate women. He forged Cole McKenna's name." She held up one page. "And he was arrogant. He printed his own name on the paper he used." She pointed to the faint watermark, visible in the bright sun. "K and Company." The crowd gasped. "But he did not just forge a name," Liza said. "He desecrated a memory." She looked up, not at Kincaid, but at the roof of the land office. "Cole." From the shadows of the false front, Cole stood. He was holding a single, yellowed piece of paper, Maggie's letter. This was his test. This was his truth. He had to read it. He began. His voice was rough, halting. He was not a reader, but the words were burned into his soul. "To my brother's wife," he read. The crowd went utterly silent. The only sound was Cole's voice, struggling, but winning. "I do not know your name. I pray that my brother, Cole, has found you. I pray he has learned to open his heart." Liza watched him, her heart aching. He was not reading to the crowd. He was reading to her. "He is a good man," Cole continued, his voice gaining strength, the shame of his illiteracy burned away by the sacredness of the act. "But he is closed up. The war, it hurt him. Do not be afraid of his silence. His heart is good. He forgets how to use it." He finished, his hand crushing the paper. "Love him. He has been alone for too long. Maggie." He looked down at the crowd, at Kincaid. "He used my sister's ghost." Cole's voice was a low, vibrating growl. "He used her death to bait his trap." The crowd was frozen, moved by a truth so profound it eclipsed all of Kincaid's lies. Kincaid's civilized mask shattered. "Fools!" he shrieked, his voice a high-pitched tear in the silence. "You are all fools. Kill them now." The assassin on the hotel roof, the one closest to Cole, stood and leveled his rifle. "This ends it. McKenna." A shadow moved on the roof behind him. Nisoi. He did not use his bow. He drove his knife into the man's back. A single, silent, upward thrust. He eased the body down without a sound. The second assassin, on the feed store roof, aimed at Liza. A shot cracked from Cole's rifle on the land office. The bullet hit the feed store's tin sign, inches from the assassin's head. The man flinched, ducked back. A third assassin, across the street, saw his chance. Liza was exposed. He stood, leveling his rifle at her chest. "Liza down," Cole roared. Cole did not wait. He did not use the ladder. He leaped from the roof of the land office, a 12-foot drop, crashing onto the wooden boardwalk below. The wood splintered. His ankles screamed in protest, but he was up. He shoved Liza, clearing her from the horse, shielding her with his own body. The third assassin fired. The bullet, meant for her heart, tore across Cole's chest, ripping his shirt, leaving a burning, red line of fire. He grunted, a sharp exhalation of pain, but he did not fall. He shoved her behind him. Nisoe saw the fourth assassin, on the assay office, aiming at the new, tangled target of Cole and Liza. He was too far for his knife, too slow for his bow. The Cheyenne warrior ran. He launched himself from the saloon roof, landing hard on the flimsy wooden awning below. The wood cracked under his weight. He did not pause. He kicked, with all his strength, the heavy, full horse trough at the edge of the street. The trough, holding 50 gallons of water, tipped. It crashed onto the street with the sound of a cannon, exploding into a shower of water and splintered wood. It was a perfect, chaotic distraction. The fourth assassin's horse, tethered below, screamed and reared, pulling the man's aim wide. The crowd, which had been frozen in terror, now exploded into rage. The fifth assassin, on the street level, tried to get a bead on Cole. Peterson roared, a sound of pure animal fury, and charged. He did not use his hammer as a weapon. He used it as a shield, deflecting the man's rifle, and then his fist, the size of a ham, smashed into the assassin's face. The sixth assassin was on the hotel roof, the one Nisoe had not reached. He stood, aiming at the mass of townsfolk. "Not in my town, missus," Hollis screamed. She raised her shotgun, the one she kept for snakes, and fired both barrels. The assassin was punched backward, vanishing from the roof. 3 farmers, their faces grim, raised their own hunting rifles. They fired at the man Cole had pinned down on the feed store. The man on the assay office roof, seeing his partners dead or fleeing, scrambled from his perch and ran. It was over in 30 seconds. Kincaid was alone. His world had evaporated. He looked at the dead men, at the armed townsfolk, at Cole, who was bleeding but standing, at Liza, who was staring at him with cold, dead eyes. He panicked. He was a coward. He grabbed the only weapon he had left Marshal DeWitt. Kincaid pulled his own small, silver derringer from his boot and pressed it to DeWitt's temple. "Stay back!" he screamed, his voice a pathetic squeal. "All of you, stay back!" He dragged the trembling, useless Marshal toward his horse, which was tethered in front of the land office. "I will kill him, I swear it." He fumbled at his saddle, trying to free a heavy leather valise. "You fools! You cannot stop me. I have friends in Cheyenne. I have the territory." He was weeping, his hands shaking. He yanked the valise, but the strap was tangled. He pulled harder, and the bag burst open. It was not full of money. It was full of tools, blank deeds, forged signatures, and a heavy brass seal, the official, illegal seal of the Territorial Land Office. The crowd went silent. It was the final, absolute proof. He was making his own law, a farmer whispered. Kincaid, seeing the seal, let go of DeWitt. He was defeated. He raised the derringer, his hand shaking, to put it to his own head. "No," Liza said. She stepped out from behind Cole. She raised her carbine. She did not aim at his head. She aimed at his chest. Her hands were rock steady. "It is over, Mr. Kincaid," she said, her voice clear and cold. "You will not escape, not even that way." Kincaid looked at her, at the woman he had tried to break, now holding his life in her hands. He laughed, a high, thin, broken sound. "Shoot me then, girlie. You do not have the—" A flash of silver. It came from the alley, cutting the angle of the sun. Nisoe had thrown his knife. It spun, not at Kincaid, but at the gun. The blade struck the small derringer, a sharp thwack of steel on steel, sending the pistol flying from Kincaid's hand. It clattered, useless, on the boardwalk. Kincaid stared at his stinging, empty hand, his mouth open in a perfect O of shock. Cole, his chest on fire, his ankles screaming, did not wait. He lunged, hit Kincaid like a bull, his shoulder driving into the smaller man's stomach. They went down, sprawling in the mud and water of the broken trough. The fight was short. Cole's rage was a pure, cold thing. He rolled Kincaid onto his stomach, grabbed the man's wrists, and bound them with the piggin string from his own belt, pulling the knots so tight they bit to the bone. He stood, breathing heavily, bleeding, covered in mud. He looked at the man he had just hogtied. The street was utterly silent. The only sound was Cole's ragged breathing and Kincaid's sobbing in the mud. Peterson, the blacksmith, walked past the body of the assassin, past the cowering, disgraced DeWitt. He walked to the saloon. He looked at the sign, $20 for any Cheyenne scalp, $50 for a warrior brought in. He ripped the sign from the wall, the wood splintering. He walked to the center of the street and broke the sign over his knee. He threw the pieces onto the boardwalk. Someone clapped. It was Mrs. Hollis. Then a farmer, then another. It was not a cheer. It was a slow, deep, rolling wave of applause. A sound Red Bluff had never heard before. A sound of respect. The applause died, replaced by a profound, shocked silence. The main street of Red Bluff, littered with the wreckage of the fight, was a tableau of judgment. Kincaid, bound and sobbing in the mud, was the center of it all. DeWitt sat on the boardwalk, his head in his hands, a broken man in a tarnished badge. Peterson, the blacksmith, his face still grim, spat in the dust. He walked to Kincaid's open valise. He picked up the heavy, illegal brass seal and held it up for the crowd to see. He was not just a thief, Peterson boomed. He was a king, making his own law, signing his own deeds. He then picked up the small, black ledger. He did not open it. He handed it to Mrs. Hollis. She opened it, and her face went pale. "It is all here," she said, her voice shaking with a cold fury. "DeWitt, $20 a week, paid in cash. The men on the roofs, $100 apiece. It is a payroll for an army of assassins." DeWitt made a small, choking sound. Cole leaned against a porch rail, the fire in his chest a dull, spreading roar. He looked at Liza. "The post office," he said, his voice strained. "Phillips." Liza understood. The conspiracy was not just Kincaid. It was the system he had built. Peterson did not wait for an order. He and 3 farmers grabbed the bound Kincaid, hauled him to his feet, and threw him into one of his own jail cells. They threw DeWitt in the cell beside him. For the first time, Red Bluff was secure. Liza, Cole, and Mrs. Hollis walked across the street to the post office. The clerk, Phillips, was inside, frantically stuffing papers into his small stove. "No more fire," Liza said, her voice catching him. Phillips froze, his hands full of letters. "Give it to me," Liza commanded. It was not the pay ledger. It was a shipping ledger. Liza opened it. Her blood ran cold. It was not a list of parcels. It was a list of women. Item 1, bride Mary S. From Ohio. Arrived May 4th. Dispatched May 5th. Item 1, bride Sarah G. From Illinois. Arrived May 12th. Dispatched May 12th. Item 1, bride Hannah W. From Boston. Arrived May 20th. Dispatched May 21st. The list went on. 20 names. 20 women who had arrived, like her, with hope, and had vanished. "Where are they?" Liza whispered, her voice a razor. I do not know," Philip shrieked, collapsing. "It was a holding camp north near the Powder River. He called them his insurance. He He would write to ranchers, lure them, then tell them their bride was detained. He would trade the women. For the deeds he traded them. Cole, leaning heavily on the doorframe, looked at Mrs. Hollis. Send a rider. Now. Not from here. Ride to Fort Laramie. Send the telegraph to the federal marshals in Cheyenne. Tell them everything. Mrs. Hollis nodded, her face white and terrible. My son will ride. The immediate danger was over, but the cost was becoming clear. The adrenaline that had held Cole upright began to drain. He swayed, his hand clutching his chest, his shirt a solid mass of dark, wet red. You are hurt, Liza said, her voice dropping from cold anger to sudden, sharp fear. She rushed to him, her hands hovering over the wound. It is a scratch, he grunted, but his knees were buckling. It is a bullet, she said. Peterson, seeing his friend falter, crossed the street in 3 strides and put his massive arm around Cole, half lifting him. To my store, Mrs. Hollis ordered. The back room. They laid him on a cot, in the small, clean room that served as the town's only infirmary. Get that shirt off him. Mrs. Hollis said, her hands already busy with bandages and a bottle of carbolic. Liza did not hesitate. She took her father's small knife from her reticule and cut the sodden, ruined fabric away from his skin. The wound was raw and ugly. The bullet had torn a long, shallow furrow across his ribs, missing the lung but taking a great deal of flesh. It was hot, red, and bleeding steadily. Hold him, Mrs. Hollis said. Liza did not hold him. She took the cloth and the carbolic herself. I will do it, she said. Her hands were rock steady. She began to clean the wound. Cole did not flinch. He did not look at the wound. He watched her face. He saw the absolute, fierce concentration in her eyes. He saw her bite her lip, her focus total. Her touch was not the light, hesitant touch of a stranger. It was firm, sure, and angry. It was the touch of a partner. She was not nursing him. She was repairing him. In the chaos of the street, Nisoe had vanished. He had not waited for thanks, or for the applause. He had seen the men who had once posted bounties for his scalp now look at him with a strange, confusing awe, and it made him uneasy. He had slipped into the alleys and retrieved his horse. He rode back to the high hills, to the hidden camp of his people. He sat before the fire, the wound in his shoulder burning. An old woman, the sister of his mother, came to him. She did not speak. She ground herbs in a stone bowl and applied the stinging, cool poultice to his wound, her leathery hands gentle. She sang a low, humming song, a song of healing. Nisoe closed his eyes. The white men's fight was over. His own was just different. The next day, the town woke to a new reality. The red elk, liberated, was now a problem. The unrestrained torrent of water was flooding the low pastures, threatening to wash out the main road. Cole, his chest wrapped tight in clean white linen, rode to the ruined dam. His body ached, but his mind was clear. He found Peterson already there, with a wagon, tools, and 3 other ranchers. They were staring at the brown, churning water. It is too much, Peterson said, scratching his beard. We stopped Kincaid, just to be flooded out. As they spoke, Nisoe arrived on the ridge. He was not alone. 10 Cheyenne men, all mounted, followed him. The ranchers tensed, their hands moving toward the rifles in their scabbards. The old fear was deep. Nisoe dismounted, his shoulder bound in his own way. He walked to the edge of the flood. The water has no master, he said, his voice loud enough for all to hear. We came to build a spillway, Cole said, stepping up beside him. To manage it. Nisoe looked at the white men. He looked at his own. It is our water. It is your water. It is the land's water. We will build it together. Peterson was the first to move. He unhitched his team. He looked at one of the Cheyenne men. You know how to handle a drag scraper." The Cheyenne man nodded. They worked. For 2 days. The Cheyenne and the ranchers worked side by side. It was silent. Awkward work. A farmer offered a Cheyenne man his canteen. The Cheyenne man drank and offered his own dried meat in return. They moved tons of rock. They did not rebuild Kincaid's dam. They built a long, low, sturdy spillway of stone, diverting the water fairly, easing the pressure, saving the valley. On the evening of the second day, Liza arrived. She brought coffee and bread. She also brought a fresh sheet of paper from the general store and a pen. "We need a new law," she said, not a forged one, a real one. She stood on a boulder, and in the quiet evening light, she wrote, "The water of the Red Elk belongs to all. We agree to share. The ranchers will take water for 3 days. The people of Nisoe will take water for 3 days. The town of Red Bluff will have 1 day. We sign this as neighbors." Cole took the pen first. He wrote his name, slowly, carefully. Cole McKenna. Peterson signed. The other ranchers made their marks. Nisoe took the pen. He did not know letters, but he made his sign. The one his father had taught him, a single, swift drawing of a hawk in flight. It was a new treaty. A week after the fight, the stage arrived. It was not the usual coach. This one was heavy, and it was escorted by 4 men with new rifles and official badges. United States Federal Marshals. A thin, severe man in a black suit stepped out. He was Judge Elias Thorne, a circuit judge from Cheyenne, summoned by the telegraph rider. He had read the frantic, detailed report. He did not waste time. He convened a court in the saloon, the body of the last assassin having been removed only that morning. Kincaid was brought in chains. DeWitt, now a prisoner, was brought in. The first witness was Phillips. He confessed to everything. The letters, the forgeries, the ledger of women. He wept, begging for mercy. The second witness was Liza. She was calm. She presented the forged letters. She presented Maggie's real letters. She presented the post office ledger, with its list of 20 names. Her voice never wavered. She spoke for 30 minutes, and the judge never looked away from her. The third witness was Cole. He presented Kincaid's forged injunction and his own newly clear deed. The fourth was Nisoe. He walked into the saloon. The men at the bar, the same men who had once offered money for his death, went silent. He placed the K & Company badge on the judge's table. Judge Thorne listened. He examined the evidence. He looked at Kincaid. "Silas Kincaid," the judge said, his voice like cold steel. "You are an animal. You have used the tools of progress to commit the crimes of a barbarian. You have perverted the law, and you have trafficked in human lives. You will be transported to Cheyenne, where you will stand trial for kidnapping, fraud, conspiracy, and murder." He turned to DeWitt. "And you have disgraced the badge you wear. You are stripped of your office, and you will stand trial as his accomplice." The postmaster, Fields, who had been hiding, finally stepped forward. He gave his own testimony, a full confession. He was fired, but Judge Thorne spared him prison. The marshals took Kincaid and DeWitt away in irons. The next morning, a different detachment of marshals, led by the directions from Phillips, rode north to find the holding camp. 2 days later, the town bell rang. It was not a call to arms or a call to worship. It was a slow, mournful toll. The town gathered in the small churchyard. Liza stood in front of them. By the single, struggling cottonwood tree, Judge Thorne was there. Cole was beside her. Nisoe stood at the edge of the crowd, a silent, watchful guardian. In her hand, Liza held the post office ledger. "We are here today," she said, her voice clear in the quiet, "to remember those who are not here, the women who came to Red Bluff, as I did, seeking a home, seeking hope." She looked at the faces in the crowd. I am the lucky one. They were not. She began to read the names. Mary Sutter, from Ohio. She took a single white ribbon and tied it to a branch of the tree. Sarah Gooden, from Illinois. She tied another ribbon. The wind caught it, and it fluttered. Hannah Winslow, from Boston. She tied another. She read every name. 20 names. 20 white ribbons, dancing in the Wyoming wind. A quiet flag of sorrow, and a promise. "We will not forget them," Liza said, her voice thick, but not breaking. "We will not let this happen again. This town will be a sanctuary, not a trap." The water was back. The creek ran clear and strong. Cole and Liza rode back to the ranch. The brown, cracked earth of the pasture was already showing a faint, impossible haze of green. They found the horses, Cole's small, beloved herd, standing knee-deep in the creek. They were drinking, their heads bowed, the sound of their deep, shuddering gulps the only sound in the valley. It was the sound of life. Cole dismounted and walked to the breaking pen he had started, the one he had abandoned. He ran his hand over the smooth, new-cut pine. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice quiet, "I will start. The army will need horses." Liza stood beside him. The ranch was alive again. Before the sun set, they rode to the high ridge, the place where it all began. Nisoe was there, waiting. He was looking north, toward the mountains. The marshals returned. Cole said. Niso looked at him. "They found the camp," Cole said. They rescued 12 of the women. They are safe. The others, they were gone. But 12 are safe." Niso nodded. It was not a perfect victory, but the world was not perfect. He looked out at the vast, open prairie. "My people are safe. The water is shared. Kincaid is gone." He looked at Cole. "You are a neighbor. Cole McKenna." He turned to Liza. "You are Hesta Aini, a warrior woman." He turned back to the wind, to the endless grass. He spoke in his own language, a low, quiet prayer to the earth. "What did you say?" Liza asked softly. Nisoe looked at her, his eyes deep and sad, but also, for the first time, peaceful. "I said that freedom is not a gift." He said, "It is not a paper from a judge. It is a way of living. It is the work of every day." That evening, back at the ranch, Cole stood for a long time, staring at the old, faded sign. It was barely legible. McKenna Ranch. Liza came from the barn. She had a can of white paint and a brush. She did not say a word. She painted the old sign, covering the faded, peeling letters with a clean, bright coat of white. When she was done, she handed Cole a smaller can of black paint and a new brush. He took it, his hand, so sure on a rifle, so gentle on a horse, was clumsy with the small brush. He stood before the blank, white sign. Liza stood beside him, her arm linked through his, her head resting on his good shoulder. He dipped the brush. He started a single black letter, M. He continued, S-K. Liza heard him, his voice a low whisper, sounding out the letters as he painted them. E-N-N-A. He finished. He stepped back, his chest aching, his ankle throbbing, his hand covered in paint. He looked at his own name, written in his own hand. A slow smile spread across his face. It was not the tight, pained grimace of his past. It was a real, true smile. It lit his eyes. He was whole. The wedding was not held in the church. It was held in the late afternoon, in the first cool breath of autumn, under the broad shade of the lone cottonwood tree by the churchyard. The white ribbons Liza had tied, honoring the lost women, still fluttered in the branches above. A silent, watchful congregation. The preacher, a new man sent by the circuit judge, kept his words short. He spoke of resilience and of building new foundations. Peterson stood as Cole's witness, his huge frame clad in a slightly too small Sunday suit. Mrs. Hollis stood for Liza, her eyes bright. Cole, his chest healed but scarred, his ankles still stiff, wore a clean shirt. He did not fidget. His eyes never left Liza. Liza wore her only good traveling dress, the one she had arrived in, but she had mended the tear from the ambush. She had washed and ironed it, and Mrs. Hollis had given her a small, dried prairie flower to pin in her hair. She did not wear a collar buttoned high to her throat. She wore a simple, open-necked bodice. The top of the scar was visible in the sunlight, but she did not seem to notice. When the preacher finished his sparse words, Cole did not fumble. He took her hand, his own calloused and sure, and slid a simple, unadorned gold band onto her finger. It was a ring he had bought from Mrs. Hollis, a ring that had sat in her display case for 10 years, waiting for a buyer. "With this," Cole said, his voice low and clear, the words he had practiced for a week. I honor you, my partner, my wife." Liza's hand trembled as she placed his ring on her finger. "My partner," she whispered. "My home." Before the preacher could speak again, Nisoe stepped forward. He had been standing at the edge of the small crowd, silent as stone. He held not a weapon, but a single, thin thread of braided horsehair, dyed a deep, earthy red. He did not speak to the preacher. He spoke to Liza. "In the eyes of my people," he said, his voice quiet but carrying, "a bond is tied, not just spoken." He took her wrist, the one with the new ring, and gently, respectfully, he tied the red horsehair thread beside the gold. "You are bound to this land," he said, "and this land is bound to you." He nodded to Cole, a meeting of equals. "Hesta Eni," he said to her again. "Warrior woman." He stepped back. The ceremony was over. That night, in the main ranch house, the silence was deep. The storm-damaged windows had been replaced. The rooms were clean, organized, and warmed by a steady fire in the hearth. This was not Maggie's cabin. This was their home. Cole sat on the edge of their new bed, watching his wife. The only light came from the single oil lantern on the bedside table. The same lantern that had lit their lessons. The same lantern that had illuminated her fear in the storm. Its light was soft, forgiving. Liza stood by the window, looking out at the vast, starry darkness. She was still in her wedding dress. She was trembling, but not from cold. "Liza," Cole said, his voice rough. He did not know what to do. He had faced down gunmen, but this was terrifying. She turned to him. She did not speak. Her hands went to the buttons on the back of her dress. She fumbled with them, her fingers clumsy. "Let me," he said, standing. She shook her head, a small, quick motion. "No," she whispered. I must." She turned her back to him, and he watched her hands struggle, her shoulders tense. She finally undid the fastenings. The dress gaped. She took a deep, shuddering breath and let it fall from her shoulders, pooling at her feet. She stood before him in her simple, white cotton chemise. And then she did the last thing, the thing she had never done for any man. She reached up to the high collar of the chemise, to the small ribbon that held it closed. She did not look at him. She looked at the floor. She untied the ribbon. She let the chemise fall open, pushing the fabric wide, off her shoulders. She stood in the lantern light, her body, her history, her pain, all of it exposed to him. The scar was stark. It began at her throat, a twisted silvered rope, and ran down, across the high, pale curve of her left breast. A land of ruin, a testament to fire and loss. She was shaking, her whole body a violent, silent tremor. She wrapped her arms around herself, not to hide, but to hold herself together. She was waiting for the recoil, the pity, the turning away. Cole did not move. He just looked. He saw the fire. He saw the girl at the window. He saw the father who had saved her. He saw the orphan who had sold her future. He saw the woman who had held a knife in the coach, who had bandaged a warrior, who had faced down an assassin, who had taught him to read his own name. He stood up. He walked to her until he was close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin. She flinched, her eyes screwing shut, waiting for the verdict. He did not wrap her in a blanket. Not this time. He raised his hand, his rough, scarred, calloused hand. He did not touch her breast. He touched the scar itself. He laid his palm flat against the raised, silvered skin. His touch so gentle it was barely a touch at all. His hand was warm. He felt her heart hammering beneath his palm. A trapped bird. She opened her eyes. He was not looking at her chest. He was looking at her face. He traced the scar, his finger following it up, to the hollow of her throat, as if tracing a map he already knew. "This," he whispered, his voice thick, his thumb resting on the ruined skin, "is your strength. This is your story." He leaned in, and he kissed her. Not her lips. He pressed his mouth gently to the very center of the scar, a soft, warm breath against the damaged tissue. Liza let out a sound, a small, broken sigh that she had held in for a year. The shaking stopped. He raised his head, his eyes meeting hers. "Cole," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. You see it." "No," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I only see you." He kissed her lips, and it was not the kiss of a conqueror, or a buyer, or a rough rancher. It was the kiss of a man who had finally, truly, come home. The life they built was quiet, but it was strong. The winter that followed was hard, but it was not lonely. Liza did not just become a rancher's wife, she became a teacher. In the afternoon, after her own work was done, she turned the long, clean center aisle of the barn into a classroom. She started with the children from the neighboring ranches, the ones who were growing up as ignorant as Cole had been. She taught them sums. She taught them reading. But others came. Peterson, the blacksmith, came one evening a week, his huge hands clumsy with a piece of chalk, asking her to teach him the numbers so he would not be cheated on freight bills. And on the days when they came to trade, 2 young Cheyenne women, sent by Niso-E, would sit shyly in the back, listening, learning the strange, hard symbols of the white man's words. Cole's work changed, too. He was still a horseman, but his purpose was different. The Army contract came through, and it saved the ranch. But his real work, the work of his heart, was with the horses no one else wanted, the ones that had been broken by cruel hands. He had a gentleness, a patience born of his own brokenness. He began taking horses that others would have shot, and he healed them. He taught them to trust again. Word spread. A veteran from the war, a man who had lost a leg in his spirit, came to Cole. Cole did not give him a horse. He taught the man how to heal one. He was not breaking horses. He was mending men. The town of Red Bluff mended. 2. The new spillway, built by the hands of both ranchers and Cheyenne, was named, simply, Red Elk Crossing. Peterson, with Liza's help, carved a heavy wooden sign. It was nailed to the new stone embankment. It read the name in 2 languages, English, and beneath it, in the sharp, symbolic lines Niso-E had drawn for her, the Cheyenne. The news from the federal marshals came with the spring thaw. The raid on Kincaid's holding camp had been a success, freeing the 12 women. But the information from the ledgers, from Phillips's testimony, had unraveled a network that spread all the way to Omaha. The kidnapping ring was broken, its leaders arrested. Several families back east, who had believed their daughters lost forever, were reunited. And in Red Bluff, Judge Thorne, on his next circuit, enacted a new town ordinance, the first of its kind, the Mallory Law. Any male, personal or official, intended for an unescorted woman, had to be opened and verified in the presence of a federal witness. The trap was broken. The fall market, 1 year after Liza's arrival, was unrecognizable. The main street was full. There was music, the sound of a fiddle and a harmonica. There was the smell of hot cornbread and fresh coffee. Cheyenne families, including the women from Liza's class, had blankets spread, trading intricate beadwork for flour and steel knives. No one stared, no one whispered. The sign that Peterson had torn down was never replaced. One evening, as the first snows were touching the high peaks, Nisoi rode to the ranch. He was not staying. He was riding north, to the Powder River, to be with the larger bands of his people for the winter. He and Cole stood by the corral, watching the horses, 2 silent men. "You have built a good home," Nisoi said. "We have," Cole said. "Do not forget," Nisoi said, "that a fence must also have a gate. Freedom is knowing when to open it." He turned to his horse, but he stopped and unslung the short, powerful bow from his shoulder. Not the one he had lost at the dam, but its brother. He held it out to Cole. "I cannot," Cole began. "It is not for shooting," Nisoi said. "It is for remembering. A man with a gun thinks of the target. A man with a bow must think of the pull. He must know his own strength. He must know when to hold and when to let go. Knowing when to hold back is stronger than the shot." Cole took the bow. It was heavy and smooth and powerful. He nodded. Nisoi mounted his horse, raised one hand in farewell, and rode into the high, cold wind, becoming a shadow against the mountains. That night, Cole and Liza sat on their porch. The ranch was silent. The air was cold, scented with pine and the promise of snow. Cole was reading, his lips moving slowly, sounding out the words from a day-old newspaper. Liza was mending a harness, her hands strong and sure. The oil lantern on the small table between them cast a steady, warm glow. Liza stopped her work, looking out at the vast, dark land. She felt the wind, the same wind that had terrified her, the same wind that had scoured this land, and she felt it brush her cheek like a friend. Cole stopped reading. He looked at his wife. The lantern light caught her, hallowing her face. It illuminated the side of her neck and the high curve of her collar, which she wore open. Always. The light hit the top of her scar. It was no longer a geography of ruin. It was not slick or pale or ugly. In the warm, golden light of the lamp, the raised tissue was no longer a mark of fire. It was a line of silver, a testament. Cole reached over and took her hand. She turned to him, and she smiled. The high, clean wind of the prairie, the wind of the free plains, blew past the porch, carrying the sweet smell of cured grass, and did not stop. Freedom had found its home. Thank you for listening to this story. I am so glad we could share this journey. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these tales travel. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Tales, like the video, and maybe hit that hype button to help share it with more folks who love a good, old-fashioned story. We will see you on the next trail.